Welcome to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. My name is Jamal Thomas. This is indeed my show. I hope you guys are doing well this morning. I'm starting a little bit late because I'm going to carry the first part of the hour. And I didn't necessarily have a guest for this part of the hour. And I didn't have a huge amount of content for this part of the hour, even though I have two segments that I want to do, which should be roughly about 40 minutes, give or take. So this should be enough time for it. Ted Raw is going to join us at 8 o'clock, followed by Shoban Saxena. And we're going to close with Dimitri Lescaris. So we should still have a really good show for you all today. Let's mute that so that it's not a buzz in our ear. This and this. All right. So yeah, interesting news taking place in the United States. And in fact, not just in the United States. Also, you have Putin and Modi that are in their meeting. And they seem like bosom buddies, so happy together. Many of you may not know that song, but I am old, and so I do remember that song. They seem happy as a lark. This is apparently a breach of protocol. When Modi just walks up to the airplane and hugs Putin before he can barely gets off the airplane. Then you have them walking together. And of course, them shaking hands, showing how happy they are together. There's also, of course, the very official ceremony where Putin was effectively welcomed with horse carriage and everything else. I mean, they pretty much rolled out the red carpet for Vladimir Putin. So you have that meeting. Putin at this location, I mean, obviously there was a meeting that took place after where they would give their announcements of what they discussed: AI cooperation, infrastructure, defense, etc. Those things. They were talking about a free trade zone that they wanted to effectively open. Russia pointed out that we would continue to supply energy to India. All of these things effectively came up. What I found interesting was the interview. The Indian media had an opportunity to effectively interview Vladimir Putin, and they seemed to ask them pretty much anything under the sun. And I want to play a few of those clips from that interview because I find some of these answers to be just super interesting. They asked him everything from how are we going to end the special military operation? Basically, how are you going to close the war out? Everything from energy production, anything from, whether you guys work behind the scenes together. Like, they asked him pretty much anything that they could ask Vladimir Putin, and he sat there and answered every question that they leveled at him. He is effectively good at this. Like, this is not like, let's say, U.S. politicians who you would ask these various questions and you would get these kind of weird off-ball answers. Putin seems to be on it and seems to be very competent in his capability of effectively fielding whatever's thrown his way. And some of these questions weren't necessarily softball questions. I mean, even the G8 or G7 question, where he was like, what's the point? Why would we go back to the G7 or G8? We've communicated that to the United States. What is the issue? We stopped doing that before even Ukraine war became of an issue, pointing out effectively, look, the political economy of the world is moving to the east. And all of these old European empires don't exactly play a part in this. These aren't even sovereign countries per se. So why do we necessarily need to play a part in something that is ebbing away? Germany is 3rd year in recession. France is nearly in recession. UK and France at one point were screaming for an IMF bailout loan, or thought was that they would need a bailout loan. So like, why would we waste our time in a decaying body when India is like the 3rd largest economy in and of itself? And many of these other economies, the UK at this point is like a 3rd world country. So I'm going to go to that first. Then there's also the thing with Hegseth, which is super interesting. Again, I am bewildered by the conversation coming out of the US on this. They don't take issue with them blowing up a boat that the Trump administration, who everybody and their mom acknowledges is a flagrant liar, is claiming, well, they had cocaine in the boat. And so we had to destroy the boat. Now, we don't murder people for carrying cocaine. And again, it is a very weird argument to me to say, well, we have all of this military hardware in the Caribbean. We had enough armaments to destroy that boat, but we couldn't stop that boat. We couldn't, board the boat, take the cocaine, take the people into custody. We couldn't do that. The Coast Guard can do it. But we, the U.S. military, had no capacity to do that. That is a very weird argument to make. And the U.S. media seems to be completely focusing on this idea of, well, there were people hanging off the boat. And they gave a kill order to murder the people that were hanging off the boat. Now, Admiral Bradley had testimony behind closed doors that obviously gets immediately leaked. So there's that. But that is a super, this gets across how weird U.S. media is and the conversations that take place in U.S. media in the political space. How bizarre is it for you to really take issue with, well, you double tapped the boat. That's our issue. You double tapped it. What about the first tap? So if they would have murdered everybody in the boat in the first tap, that would have been fair game. Are we to believe that the people in that boat stood a chance against the U.S. military? Is that what they're making the argument? That the U.S. military that went thousands of miles away in order to attack people in the Caribbean, that those people in the Caribbean was a threat to that military? Is that what we're really arguing and making the case about? And then, this is very bizarre to me. But they have seemingly taken a huge amount of issue with the fact that they double tapped the boat and that the people that were hanging off the side of the boat were ostensibly murdered. Hey, man, if you murder them the first time around, that's fair game. But if you double tap and murder them the second time around, that's when we wag our finger. This is very bizarre. This is very, very bizarre. And this seems to be the thing that is drawing Hegseth and Bradley, seemingly to a lesser degree, but Hegseth in the crosshairs. Because the question that they're asking Hegseth is, well, what was the order that you gave to Bradley? Did you tell Bradley, kill them all? Or did you tell Bradley it was a lethal order? And whether you tell Bradley, kill them all, or lethal order, both of those things effectively mean the same thing. If you tell somebody, hey, these are lethal strikes, and what they interpret it is, kill the people on the boat, their interpretation is not that far away from what you've told them as their orders. I hope you get my point. Meaning there's not a huge amount of daylight between those two things. And so you're in this kind of weird spot where elements of the Trump, let's say people who are effectively Trumpers in Congress, who licks Trump ass thoroughly clean every morning before Trump even takes a shower, that these people, some of them are breaking Trump's way, but some of them aren't. And many of them are criticizing a policy that is effectively at work with murdering, 84 people at this point, including a recent boat that was also blown up. This is amazing. It's amazing that this is the thing to which they take issue with. Not the 80 people that were murdered, but the fact that they double tapped one of the boats. That's mind-blowing to me. And I want to get into that also, because the testimony that has come out, you get these shifting narratives of, no, this didn't happen. Okay, it did happen. And the order was given. And then Hegseth comes out and says, hey, I stand by Bradley completely, even though I didn't tell him to do that. Effectively standing by somebody without standing by somebody, by throwing them under the bus and acting as if they were acting purely under their own steam and under their own command. No, all of this is very bizarre. All of this is very strange. It's not that it's strange for the United States to murder people. I want to be very clear about that. When Obama had his kill list, and he was murdering people in the Middle East, the majority of which were civilians. Okay, well, we accepted that as being perfectly okay, right? The difference is we weren't seeing constant stream of videos of him doing that, nor were we seeing Obama putting it on Twitter of him murdering large numbers of civilians. That is the only difference between the two things. But either way, it didn't make it right when Obama was doing it. And it damn sure doesn't make it right that Donald Trump is doing it. And Donald Trump is using one of the most ludicrous arguments in the world. Well, there are weapons of mass destruction. I'm sorry. There are drugs coming out of Caracas, which everybody knows is nonsense. Everybody knows it's nonsense. And now Rubio, and you know it's nonsense because, again, of the shifting narrative. Well, it's fentanyl. Well, no, they had cocaine in the boat. Well, there's Hezbollah, and they're trafficking drugs into Africa or something like that, and they're moving into Europe, and it's coming to the U.S. Like, it's utterly bizarre what they're effectively trying to use and the shifting narratives that are effectively taking place on multiple fronts in this, whether it's what is being trafficked, or for that matter, the rationale behind murdering people who are in boats. I don't even know why the media takes it with credibility when they're saying there's cocaine in the boat. What evidence do you have that there's cocaine in the boat? What evidence? What is it? Because Trump said so. So you acknowledge that Trump is a flagrant liar on every other issue, but on this particular issue, you take his word with any level of credibility? Nonsense. Complete nonsense. Let's start with the Modi meeting. Oh, also, the leaked conversation. The leaked conversation is interesting. It was between European leaders, effectively talking about how they need to protect Zelensky, and Donald Trump is about to betray Ukraine. Dude, Ukraine was betrayed in 2014 when they overthrew the government, because at that point the die was cast. Everything else has been a complete and utter betrayal, started from that moment, going forward in time, even until now. Trying to come to a close to the war, that's assuming that's what the U.S. is even trying to do. Not a betrayal. That's the thing that ends the killing. There's a difference in those things. Let's start with the Putin meeting. What time? Good. Doing good on time. All right. Let's start with the Putin interview. So India media, and I love the saras, by the way. In fact, I even love the saras here. I think that's what they call them, saras. The gowns, the traditional gowns. Oh, I love those. This is Putin in conversation with Indian media. Now, the first question they asked him to, in fact, I want to go to the special military operation first. Let's go here first. This is the traditional meeting. They roll out the red carpet for Putin. Horses included. Man in turbans. Men in mustaches. Yeah, I love those. I love those outfits. There was a parade here yesterday, and you had all of these women wearing those. And I remember when I was in India, one of the guys, like the men with the turbans and the thick mustaches, that looked very badass. So let's go to this one. Putin, they're asking him effectively about a character assessment of Donald Trump. And Putin uses this as a moment to kind of point out the hypocrisy of U.S. policy regarding India. Now, obviously, the policy for the hypocrisy is not, this is just normal for the U.S. This is whole rules-based order premise, right? We do what we want, and you suffer as you may as a result of what we want. Meaning, the rules that we run by are not the same rules that you run by. Now, Russia's kind of pointing out effectively the United States is picking on India, period. They're not doing this with China. They're doing this to India because they consider India to be the weak link. How is this right? How is this fair? Especially considering the United States buys nuclear fuel from the United States. Putin, at this point, is not pulling punches. He's, still being very polite. But even his politeness is making a point.
How would you characterize Mr. Donald Trump, the President of the United States of America?
I never give character assessments about my colleagues. neither those I've worked with in the past nor current leaders of individual states. These assessments should be made by citizens who vote for their leader during elections. As for India's purchases or purchase of energy resources from Russia, well, I would like to note, and have already mentioned this publicly once, the United States itself still buys nuclear fuel from us for its own nuclear power plants. That is also fuel, uranium for the reactors operating in the United States. If the US has the right to buy our fuel, why shouldn't India have the same privilege? This question deserves thorough examination, and we stand ready to discuss it, including with President Trump.
Well,
How would you
obviously, that is not aimed at Donald Trump. That is aimed at the Indian audience. There's a difference in those things. Meaning, he's pointing out, look, you guys are a sovereign state. Many of the countries around the globe are sovereign states. You guys are like number 3 in regards to industrial power and all of this other stuff, or in regards to economic output. Why does the US get to dictate whether or not you can purchase oil from us? Why? And on top of that, the United States buys uranium from us, which is fuel for the nuclear power plants. Whether it is fuel in the sense of oil or fuel in the sense of uranium, why is there a difference in these things? Why does one rule apply in the context of the US and one rule applies for India? Now, obviously, this is not a conversation for the United States. The US doesn't care about this. We don't care that we are hypocrites. That doesn't matter to us, one iota. This is kind of the prerogative of a hegemon, right? But in the context of India, and a certain bit of humiliation in accepting that role, it may and it should matter, which is the reason why he is effectively bringing this up on Indian media. Why is this right? And why is this acceptable? Yeah, good question. The next one I want to go to has to do with, I guess we could do the G8 or G7. And they're effectively saying, hey, are you going back to the G7? And Putin makes what, may be the chagrin of Europe at this point. Obviously, Europe may not necessarily want Russia back into the G7. That's neither here nor there. But he's making this point of like, dude, these countries that used to be empires, this is not the world today. These are vassal states. They barely have sovereignty of their own in this case. They certainly don't have sovereignty in regards to their own foreign policy. And so you have these economic that used to be dynamos that are effectively being falling behind technologically, militarily, etc. Meaning in all the ways that matter, Europe doesn't matter. So why should I give any of this pretending that this ultimately matters? And of course, on this, he is absolutely and completely correct.
Do you want to go back to being a part of the G8? Because that's a lot. There are a lot of reports on that. So is that something that Russia is looking at?
No.
That's an interesting answer, sir. You're very clear.
I love I love that, right? No explanation, just niet. No. And he just stops. Like he doesn't even follow up, just niet. He just sits there. And if they were like, oh, he's not going to follow up with that. We need to fill the air. Look, I tell you, during radio, one of the things is you don't let dead air. Dead air is a bad thing. And so for him to just give a flat answer, and they're probably expecting somewhat of a more full-flooded answer, and they just sit there like, oh, he's not going to follow up. He just said, niet. No, I don't care. We're not doing it. He will explain, though.
What about that?
Да. Well, yes.
Дело вот в чем. Дело в том,
The thing
что
is,
я когда-то так
Well, I'm not going into detail, but I basically stopped going to these meetings back in the past. That's the first thing. Secondly, I can hardly understand why countries of the G7 call themselves G7, you know, in Russia it's called G like for great, big. The thing is, India's economy in purchasing power ranks third. And what about the UK or other countries in terms of purchasing parity capacity? I think it's 10th place or something like that. I don't remember. But yes, these countries have a high-tech economy with a very solid foundation, which is still very much there, even though their share and the world economy is shrinking year in, year out, inexorably. And the trend is there, and it's going to persist, apparently.
Yeah, why would I do that? Why would I need to do that? Why give them any credibility when the reality of it is the trend of the world is moving eastward? And as the trend of the world is moving eastward, these economies will become more and more irrelevant. So why do I need to go and give this kind of pretense that they matter when they don't? Yeah. Well, good answer. So one of the other ones. All right. So this is special military operation. Let's go to that one. They asked them effectively, hey, when will the goals of the special military operation be accomplished? Meaning, when will you finish this? Now, this is fascinating to me. And the reason why it's fascinating to me is because obviously part of the reason that India is asking this is because of the fallback consequences to India. Meaning, if there was no special military operation, if Russia was not at war with Ukraine right now, and India was buying fuel from Russia in this way. Now, I get it. This question is a little bit more complicated than I'm making it. Part of the rationale for Russia shifting its oil to China, shifting its oil to India, was a direct result of Europe stop purchasing Russian oil. So it's kind of like saying, you know, if I was this other person, how would I behave? Okay, well, again, dude, if you were this other person, you would behave as the other person because you would have had the same experiences and everything else. The question is a little bit more complicated. You're trying to say, with all of my biases and the way that I behave currently, if I was put into that spot, how would I act? In this very specific case, it is unclear whether or not the volumes of oil that are being traded with India and China would be traded with India and China if the special military operation wasn't in existence. But skipping over that for the moment, this question from the standpoint of India's take is, dude, we're getting hit with consequences of this war. And getting hit with the consequences of this war, the United States is effectively putting pressure on us. How long is this going to last? Now, I would wager to you that part of the conversation that Putin had with Modi was probably around this also. Obviously, when Putin had the Alaska summit with Trump, one of the first countries, China, India, Brazil, etc., all of these were on a call discussing the terms, or let's say whatever Donald Trump and Putin discussed in that context. So he obviously keeps them abreast of what is effectively taking place. And, you know, even in conversations with Mark pointed out, look, Russia has a lot of alliances and a lot of agreements. And they have to be able to negotiate with these various countries in order to prevent fallback consequences to these countries. Obviously, India is one of these countries that got hit with fallback consequences. And so this question is not coming out of a vacuum, right? Does India really care about the special military operation? Does that reporter, does anything in her heart cares about the fact that Russia's at war? Probably not. Does she care about India getting hit with the consequence of that war? Yes. That's where it comes into play. So this question is not coming out of a vacuum. That's why I find the question to be interesting. This is Putin's response to her asking about the special military operation. Effectively, look, what is the main objective? When are you going to finish this war?
We will finish it when we achieve the goals set at the beginning of the special military operation, when we free these territories.
Достигнем целей,
That's all.
поставленных перед началом специальной военной операции. Освободим эти территории. Вот и все.
So, what is that goal?
By the way, I want to point something else out. Notice what he says. We will finish this when we free these territories. Now, this is something else that a lot of people in the West miss. From the Russian point of view, these territories are being liberated, meaning you had an overthrow of the Ukrainian government. The legitimate government of Ukraine ceased to exist in 2014. This would be like if Donald Trump in 2020 was able to get his gimps in Congress to allow him to stay in power. And in staying in power, let's say California, Washington State, maybe a few other states are like, we're out. We're out. We had agreements that we will stick with U.S. states under the idea of voting and everything else. Well, you've just done something else. So the legitimacy of the U.S. government has effectively and utterly collapsed. We do not have to maintain our agreements if you break your agreements in regards to, let's say, constitutional order. The Constitution is no longer valid. It would be that, right? And so the countries in Ukraine at this point, when the overthrow takes place, you get the Eastern region saying, hey, this is not what we agreed upon. You've effectively overthrown the legitimate government of Ukraine. And so the Banderites that are effectively in power from the perspective of the Russian state and from the perspective of, let's say, the country, the regions in the East, were under occupation. So when he's arguing this, he's not arguing this from the standpoint of us taking a territory. It is argued from the perspective of us liberating a territory. We're removing these Nazis from power. We are liberating these areas that were under this kind of unelected occupation in this case. I hope you get my point. It's a framing, but the framing is not entirely wrong. Let's go back to the beginning of this because I want to let it play out in its entirety.
We will finish it when we achieve the goals set at the beginning of the special military operation, when we free these territories.
Достигнем целей,
That's all.
поставленных перед началом специальной военной операции. Освободим эти территории. Вот и все.
So, what is that goal? What is the end game for Vladimir Putin in Ukraine?
Так я же...
I have said that already.
Мы признали
Listen, we didn't recognize these self-proclaimed republics for 8 years.
самопровозглашенных республик.
8 years.
Они провозгласили...
They declared independence while we were trying to establish relations between the rest of Ukraine and those republics.
Потом, когда поняли, что это невозможно, что их просто уничтожают,
But when we realized this wasn't possible, that they were simply being destroyed, we had no choice but to recognize them.
в рамках
And not just their existence on part of the territory, but within administrative boundaries established during Soviet times, then later under independent Ukraine after its independence, still within those administrative borders.
административных границ. И мы сразу украинец.
And right away we told Ukraine, the Ukrainian troops, people don't want to live with you anymore. They voted in a referendum for independence. Withdraw your troops from there, and there won't be any military actions. No, they chose to fight instead. Now they have pretty much fought themselves into a corner. All this boils down to one thing. Either we take back these territories by force, or eventually Ukrainian troops withdraw and stop killing people there.
It's a civil war, is what it boils down to. It's a civil war. I mean, I know a lot of people talk about it in this way of, well, Russia just invaded. Yeah, it's not that simple. You effectively had Ukraine in the middle of a civil war. The West pretended as if there was no East Ukraine, pretended that ethnic Russian Ukrainians apparently weren't Ukrainians. And so they ignored the fact that you had the East that was fighting the West. Russia came in on the side of the East. The US and NATO came in on the side of the West. It's a civil war. And so when he's making and explaining this, he's explaining it from that context. It's the usual context that you don't necessarily hear because that's not necessarily the way to talk about it in, let's say, Europe or the United States. But the context is correct, or the very least is more correct than the way they talk about it in the US, this unprovoked war of aggression that Russia just launched for shits and giggles in regards to invading Ukraine. There's a difference in those things, right? I think there's one more. Okay, right here. So this one, they get into this idea of whether or not Modi and Putin collaborates against other countries. Like, hey, do you put your heads together in order to go after other countries? And if, again, this is this kind of multipolar world that they are arguing for. We don't go after anybody, so nobody should come after us.
You know, neither me nor Prime Minister Modi, despite approached our collaboration.
Come on.
Someone. President Trump has his own agenda, his own goals, whereas we focus on ours, not against anyone, but rather aimed at safeguarding our respective interests, India's and Russia's interests. In our dealings, we cause no harm to others, and I believe that leaders from other countries should appreciate this. You know,
Hey man, live and let live. Live and let live. Our dealings, we're dealing with sovereign nations. And because we're dealing with sovereign nations, what business does our, let's say, negotiations have to do with anyone else in regards to their negotiations? Well, yeah, obviously he's right. There was another question at one point that he was asked about Ukraine joining NATO. And as he pointed out, he was like, look, we don't take issue with Ukraine defensive position. That is their business. By the same token, if you're joining an organization that has been moving closer and closer to the border, and you do so after the overthrow of a government, meaning this wasn't like the Ukrainian government in and of itself decided to join NATO. This was the West overthrows the government of Ukraine. And then the new government, the coup government, decides, hey, let's get rid of the provision in our constitution about NATO, and let's now join NATO, an organization that has ostensibly been against the Soviet Union, but also the beating heart of the Soviet Union, which is Russia. Yeah, no. And if you put this in a different context, would the US be okay with this? If the Warsaw Pact countries at the time overthrew the government of Mexico and then put in troops, built up a military on the border of the United States, you had Mexico screaming that they were going to take back parts of the United States, how would the United States have regarded Mexico? We would have destroyed Mexico. We would have eaten Mexico alive. And it would have been far more punitive in the way that Russia has been going after prosecuting this particular war. Yeah, they, look, the Indian media, to their credit, asked questions that were relevant to India, but also relevant from the standpoint of, let's say, geopolitical or world politics. And it wasn't, what's your favorite puppy? It wasn't that nonsense. It was at the very least questions that on some level mattered, or at the very least mattered in the context of India. So, interesting interview, put it mildly. I think the special military operation one is probably the one that I'm most interested in. Effectively, look, we will end this war when the terms of the special military operation have been accomplished. Period. Mic drop. Nothing else to say. This is when this conflict will end. And as he pointed out in the beginning, and people often even forget that, right? He didn't bring up the Minsk agreements. He didn't bring up the Istanbul agreements. I guess maybe he did in an oblique way, but effectively saying, if you stop, because these people no longer want to be under the auspices of your country, a lot of people forget that the Minsk agreements would have allowed Ukraine to remain whole. They still would have remained, maintained control over those territories. That wasn't wanted. That wasn't part of in the cards. And so you end up with 1 million dead Ukrainians and 100,000, 150,000 dead Russians in this case. And Europe whipping itself into a fervor over this idea that Russia is trying to take over all of Europe. Mind you, with 150,000 troops, which is what they started off with. So there is that. Yeah, interesting visit. And obviously, as I pointed out before, they hit on issues of technical integration, a free trade zone, which is something that apparently they wanted to build, security, strategic agreements, effectively Russia supplying military equipment, nuclear cells, or building, let's say, small, what do you call them, portable nuclear facilities, those type of things. All of these things were things that they were effectively discussing with Modi. So obviously it was a good meeting. I mean, this picture alone gets across how these two, if not get along in earnest, show how they want to be seen as getting along. And this picture is not entirely for the Indian audience, which it is in part, but it's also for, let's say, the Trump administration. It's like, dude, you can pressure us all you want. This relationship isn't going anywhere. And I think this meeting kind of made that clear, if nothing else was clear. One last thing before I go, what time is it? Actually, I don't think I have time. I think Ted is about to come on. Let me make sure. I want to make sure I sent them the link at all. Give me 1 second. I'm pretty certain I did. Come on. Yeah, I sent them the link. All right. Ted is going to be on shortly. This conversation was leaked. So apparently European leaders, they have a conversation. And in having the conversation gets leaked. Okay, I'll come back to it because Ted is here. Good. We are joined with the man of mystery himself, Ted Raw. You doing okay today?
Good morning. How are you doing, Jamal?
I am doing well. Happy belated Thanksgiving.
Happy belated Thanksgiving to you too. Happy pre-Christmas.
Yeah, we're on our way, right? Are you going to be on for Christmas, or are you guys taking time off?
That's being discussed. I think we might end up doing some pre-tapes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ted Raw, political cartoonist, syndicated columnist. He is with the one, the only, the great Manila Chan. They come on Monday through Friday from at 10 a.m., meaning immediately after the show. He's also on Deprogram. That's with John Kiriakou. So definitely check him out. That one comes on at 9 o'clock or 9 a.m. Again, immediately after the show. No, I'm sorry. That's during my show. Bastard.
It's awkward. Yeah.
It's okay. It's not awkward at all. It's perfectly fine. But Deprogram with John Kiriakou and the one and only Manila Chan. So thank you for joining me, Ted.
Multitask. Have both screens open at the same time.
Oh, you're perfectly fine.
Yeah.
So I've been watching what has been taking place with the Hegseth stuff, and I've been fascinated by this. It blows my mind, if I'm being honest with you, because it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm not in the U.S., so I'm not seeing U.S. media in its earnest, like in its fullest grotesque expression. But it seems like what they take issue with is not that they have been murdering people in boats. That seems okay. And it doesn't seem like they take issue with all of this military hardware in the Caribbean to try to overthrow Maduro. That seems okay. They seem to take issue with the double tap. It's like, hey, if you would have murdered everybody in the boat the first time around, that's fair game. But the fact that the people were hanging off the side of the boat, that's not fair game.
It's rude.
And, yeah, right. It's very bizarre, right? And then
it's
you have
very impolite. It's just not fair play, Jamal.
But none of it is fair play.
It's totally fair play when you're on a boat 1,000 or more miles away from a country you've never been to and don't speak the language and don't know anything about, to have a missile come cruising out of the sky and blow you up. That's totally okay. But if you are lucky enough to survive the inferno and you're floating there in the middle of the ocean waiting for the sharks to come and eat you, and then a second missile comes along and puts you out of your misery, that's That's rude. That's it's not sporting.
That's the issue. It's the second. It's the double tap, not the first tap. It's the double tap. Trump has murdered over 80 people in these boats, and what's wild about it? Initially, they were like, "Well, we didn't double tap it." That was their first argument. Then, what is it? Levitt, I believe. I may be mispronouncing her name. Caroline Levitt. She comes out and says, "Well, yeah, we did it. Of course we did." Okay, so the story is now changing. Then it was like, well, Hegseth gave the order to kill them all. And then it's like, well, Hegseth didn't say kill them all, but he said it had lethal strikes. Now, I don't know the difference between these two things. Kill them all and lethal strikes feel very similar to me, but okay, whatever. And then they tried to say, well, they were still a threat because they were trying to crawl back into the boat, whatever was left of the boat, the smoking husk of the boat that was split in half by their own determination.
A 40-foot boat, Jamal, right? So, you and I are both robust men. If you and I are in the water, I'm a great swimmer. I was a lifeguard. If we're both in the water and on the high seas, by the way, we're not like in a pool here. We're in the ocean. And like, let's just say our boat had survived. Do you think you and I can turn over a 40-foot vessel, the two of us?
I had a hard time.
Even if we're on even if our feet can touch the ground, which they can't. We can't.
I had a hard time crawling back into a jet ski, let alone flipping over a boat.
Yeah, if you've ever had a swamped canoe and tried to turn that fucker over, that's at most 10 feet long. Good luck, right? You can't really. It's like what their story is impossible. That we're getting back to naval shenanigans like the Nord Stream pipeline. It's like this is like we're talking about. It defies all credulity.
Well, they tried to claim that the people were trying to turn back over the boat, and they watched them apparently for 41 minutes as they tried to do this. Now, initially, the story was, well, they may have had communication equipment, and so they remain a threat. So they're trying to argue that the guy hanging on the side of the boat for dear life was still a threat to the entirety or like 30% of the U.S. military.
Because he can call narco terror 911. Dude,
yeah,
like send the wolf. I've got to send Harvey Keitel. I'm in a serious situation here.
It's so insane. And they're saying this with a straight face, by the way, saying, well, obviously Bradley gave the kill order because after 41 minutes of watching this guy in the water, effectively nearly drowning, that the military was still terrified.
These are dying men. They probably were injured. You have to assume.
No.
I mean, the thing is they would have died anyway. I got to say, so here's the thing. I don't believe that automatically changing stories indicate a lie. But in this case, I think it does because there's so many people. First of all, this incident is recorded. It's recorded on the camera from the drone, and it's recorded inside whatever control room they did this. And there were several witnesses. So it's documented. We keep documents the way the Nazis kept documents. I mean, we love our documents. So this isn't like a girl waking up from a fog after a drunken night out wondering if she's been date raped or not. There's no fog here. This is like something happened or it didn't. The very fact that we know it was 41, not 40, not 42 minutes is just a reflection of that fact. They're lying. They got caught. You and I both like Roman history. It's like, I think this turned out to just be viewed as not sporting because, there were incidents in Roman times when someone was sentenced to execution and the swordsman would try to decapitate the victim several times and it would fail. And basically it became practice. Like they got 3 whacks at you. And if they didn't chop off your head, you were free to go. It happened to some Christian saint. Where she went on to live decades after the attempted execution. It's just sort of the crowd's like, oh, come on, you had your shot. Or it's like, we hear about these stories about botched lethal injections in the US and you hear how foul it is. Like they keep looking for the vein. And of course, we're not questioning capital punishment in general. We're just questioning, like, come on, you tortured the guy unnecessarily. I mean, finally, the New York Times today has a piece that says, well, this double tap story, the second strike question is obscuring the question of whether any of the attacks were legal. And of course they're not. There's no justification that's been given whatsoever for any of this. I mean, it's like, it's hard to even, the lies flow so fast and thick in this administration that it's really hard to even know where to start. I mean, do you start with the fact that, like, the story is false? Okay, like, these people are sending drugs to the United States. No, they're not. They're sending drugs to Africa, and they're sending drugs to Trinidad. It's like, are we going to start with the fact that the drugs that they're sending are, is cocaine, not fentanyl? And fentanyl's the problem in the U.S. Are we going to start with the fact that we have no evidence whatsoever that any of these particular boats were involved in drug trafficking? Are we going to start with the fact that even if these stories are all completely true and it's a giant fentanyl palooza headed to the coast of Texas, that, like, the way you handle that is you send the Coast Guard out to interdict them, and then you put them on trial, and if they're found guilty, they go to jail, because drug smuggling is not a capital offense in the United States. I mean, it's hard to know. And it's like, basically, it's like, this is all about putting pressure on the Maduro government. I don't know that Maduro really cares. The whole thing is just, it's so fucked up in so many ways. I think that's part of the genius of it. With Trump, you're always playing whack-a-mole if you're in the opposition. And with the feckless Democrats, they're not to mention, they're in no position to criticize Trump, right? I mean, their guy, Obama, invented the term squirter to make fun of people whose heads got blown off and were splurting blood during drone strikes. I mean, Obama loved his drone strikes. He watched them personally. Tuesday kill list, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, what's happened is that our government is depraved. It is bloodthirsty. It has no sense of decency, and it's basically morally corrupting we, the people of the United States, by making us. I mean, our moral obligation here is to overthrow this government. I mean, any government that would do anything like this, but we can't or we won't. And so therefore we're complicit. We are good Germans. It's horrific.
Yeah. I think I've used the same term, good Germans. Or I don't think I've said good Germans, but I've used the same term in the way that the German government just the German public watched what the Germans were doing.
Yeah.
And whether they thought they could overthrow it, whether they were okay with it.
At least they tried a few times.
Yeah, they did try a few times. Yeah. So this is Rubio. Now, Rubio is given his explanation of why we must overthrow Maduro, why Maduro must go, and why the United States must effectively murder.
By the way, Jamal, before you put this on, I have to say, can you imagine? I was thinking about this last night. Can you imagine? Let's say you and I were both like PR flags for the administration, which is what Rubio is, right? Imagine, so your job is, they pay you pretty well. You get like $200,000 a year. Man, I know you and I could both use it. So they call you into a room and they're like, all right, Jamal, we've decided to take out the government of Ecuador. And you're like, why? Are they threatening us? No, but the president's made this decision. So go out there to the cameras, and this is the story we're telling you to say. Wouldn't you just have this feeling like a rock in your stomach? Like, I have to go out there and be a fool and be a stooge and and I have to go out and tell this nonsense that I know isn't true and is stupid. And it's not even a good lie. I'm lying. Everyone knows I'm lying. And I know that everyone knows I'm lying. I mean, it's embarrassing in a way, right?
Yeah. It's like, do I look fat in this dress?
Right.
No.
I don't.
You look great in
that much. No, not that much. I do need it. I want it, but I don't need it that much. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, It would eat me alive
It's
to do
not
that.
worth it. I'd rather blow my brains out, honestly.
Yeah,
It's not worth it. It's just
like-
it's like, where's your fucking dignity? You know?
I don't think these people get to the positions that they're in because they have dignity. Dignity is expensive.
Yeah, well, that's
It's
true.
expensive.
Yeah, I mean,
Integrity is expensive.
Look at Ted Cruz fully on board, sitting behind the president. You know, after what Trump said about his dad.
Yep.
It's like, your dad
He called his wife ugly.
Your dad,
He called his wife ugly.
and it's like, and your dad killed JFK.
Yep. Yeah. I thought it was his uncle, but maybe it was his dad.
I
But
think
it's
his
like
dad. His dad is Smoking Man from X-Files. Yeah.
he called his wife ugly. For some reason, I think that's worse.
No, that's
and
not.
then-
That's like, remember in The Sopranos where one of the characters, Johnny Sack, has an overweight wife, and like and he's gonna kill like a bunch of people over this. Like, you insulted
Right.
my wife.
Yeah, man. I don't think these people get to the positions that they're in because they have integrity. I think it's the opposite. And
No.
Rubio, who is all on board for this. I mean, like,
Yeah.
all the
Oh,
reporting is that this is
completely.
Rubio's.
What a little worm.
Yeah, this is his baby. Hey,
All
we
right,
need to go
anyway.
and murder a lot of Venezuelans. It's just outrageous. Speaking of that little worm, this is Rubio trying to come up with a slippery explanation of why they need to murder a lot of Venezuelans.
The Venezuelan regime is a source of instability in the entire region. Over 8 million Venezuelans have flooded into neighboring countries as a result of the regime's activities within their own, including into the United States. They also happen to be the foothold of Iran. That's not spoken about enough. Iran, its IRGC, and even Hezbollah has a presence in South America, and one of their anchor presence, especially for the Iranians, is inside of Venezuela. So the Venezuelan regime is a source of instability.
So they're cocaine and fentanyl. They are, well, initially it was fentanyl, then it became cocaine.
Mhm.
They are a source of instability in the region. And Iran and Hezbollah.
And they're
Because
stooge of
Hezbollah-
Iran. That's right.
and they're
Ripped right
stooge of
out of
Iran.
the Dick Cheney playbook of
Yep.
claiming that Iraq, which was a mortal enemy of Al Qaeda, was somehow aligned with them and was going to give them nuclear weapons. Yeah, I mean, not saying that Venezuela is a mortal enemy of Iran, but there is no evidence whatsoever that Iran has anything to do with Venezuela. You know,
Well, there's no evidence of Hezbollah. I mean, what does Lebanon have to do with Venezuela?
yeah, nothing. And like, if it and by the way, Venezuela is a sovereign state and is allowed to have friendly, cozy trade and other relations with Iran if it wants to. But it's you know, the source of instability is the one that makes me laugh the hardest. So, you know, again, we talk about the rise of Hitler. So, you know, Hitler created instability, and the Nazis created instability in the streets of German cities in the late 20s and early 30s. And then they said, well, we can fix it. We can bring law and order. Well, I'm sure that's true since you guys are causing all the instability.
Right.
And that was totally true that's true here. It's like any instability that is coming from Venezuela is similar to the instability that came out of Honduras after the United States overthrew its democratically elected president. I mean,
Yes.
the United States, you know, kind of weekend couped Hugo Chavez and has ever since been imposing, you know, draconian economic sanctions. And the only reason that they're still standing is because they have oil to sell. Otherwise, they'd be fucked 6 ways till Sunday. They had some natural disasters to deal with too, in terms of severe floods. But then, you know, it's the U.S. is the cause of the instability. So we impose sanctions, and then the country's poor, which is the whole point, by the way, of sanctions, is to make people miserable, and theoretically they would overthrow their government. That never
Right.
happens, but okay. And then, so they're fleeing as refugees, assuming that's even true. Those numbers, those seem wildly inflated to me. And then we blame the victim that we made. I mean, you know, it's totally like the kid who kills his parents and complains that he's an orphan.
Yeah, it's like she had a short dress. What can I do? Right? It's that nonsense.
Well,
Like,
also,
it's
you
like,
bought her the short dress and told her that you got horny looking at her, looking at her as a slut, and then she went out and then
yeah, there was a Beavis and Butthead episode was like, she's sexually harassing me. He was like, what? It's like, what? Yeah, it's that nonsense. It's insane. Like, and yet the media's issue is, yeah, but you double tapped. Like, that blows my mind.
Well,
And to make
it is like Al Capone and taxes, right? I mean, part of you has to be like, well, I'm happy that people are mad about something, right? Like, okay, so I mean, I guess there's like, it's not completely anything goes. There are limits, I guess. But you're right, Jamal. You're right. The whole thing from day one is completely illegitimate. And by the way, another thing I've been thinking about is, it's not hard for you or I or anybody watching here to imagine a United States not long from now that is a weak country and is not able to project or military power, or maybe even able to effectively defend itself. And that day is going to come, and then we're going to be like, oh my God, oh, what happened to your brother? Oh, well, he's a fisherman off Montauk, and he was taken out by an Iranian drone. Oh, what can you do? Write a letter to the UN. I mean, all the shit that we're doing to other countries and to innocent people, and every one of these 87 people in Venezuela is by definition under U.S. law innocent, because none of them have been found guilty in an American court or in any court. So the point is, these are innocent people. So you're killing 87 innocent people. I mean, we're just getting away with it because no one gives a shit about Venezuela, and because we have lots of nuclear weapons, and because we're big, mean bullies. But like, that day will not always be here. And then we're justifying that being done to ourselves.
Yeah. And then on 9/11, of course, it was like, oh my God, feel my pain. Feel my pain.
It's like, they killed 3,000 of us. It's like, I'm sure the Vietnamese are crying.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sure a lot of countries are crying. The kill squads in South America, I'm sure they're crying too.
Yeah.
This is to make this situation even worse, to make it even worse. So, when the Nazis in the Nuremberg trial would say, well, wait, we were following orders.
Mm-hmm.
We were just following orders. We just did what we were told to do.
And they had a better claim to that. That defense was a better defense for them, because they had the Führer principle. It was enshrined in law that any order that came directly or indirectly from Hitler had the full force of German federal law and had to be obeyed without any questioning. We don't have that law here.
And what was the response? It doesn't matter. It
Yeah,
was
it's like,
illegal.
you should have known better.
You should have known better. All right. So Admiral Halsey, I want to make sure I get his name right. Yeah, Halsey. This gentleman, this brother, understood the difference between, hey, this doesn't feel legal to me, and took issue with what Hegseth was effectively doing, and pointed out, like, look, man, these are illegal orders. I'm not comfortable with this. And Hegseth effectively was like, apparently there was a contentious meeting between the two, and Hegseth says, I want your resignation. Now, a TV personality, alcoholic, is effectively telling
neo-Nazi.
This guy, yeah, and this Halsey, Naval's Aviation's badge, Naval Distinguished Service Medal, Defense Superior Service Medal, Legion of Merit with 4 award stars. Basically, all of these are awards that this gentleman got. And he's telling him, he's like, dude, this is not legal. He gets dismissed. Bradley apparently goes and does the illegal order on behalf of Hegseth. So the point that I'm trying to make here is, it wasn't like Hegseth wasn't told, hey, I know you're alcoholic, and I know you're a TV personality, but this is not legal. This is not what the military is supposed to be doing.
Right.
He clearly knew, because he was told by somebody who would know. And this guy decided.
An admiral knows this, right? And the law of the sea is super clear, although it's not the only thing that applies here, right? Like, the same exact situation, like, if you in terrestrial combat, if you capture enemy soldiers and they become, at the point where they surrender, they become your charge. And you have to take care of them and feed them and dress their wounds and and make sure nothing bad happens to them. You can't even photograph them. There's all sorts of rules. I mean, in the law of the sea even goes further than that. I mean, it's like, we all know from World War II, like, if a German U-boat went down and there were survivors, the survivors were all brought on board and treated and taken as prisoner. Same thing in the Pacific. If any Japanese sailors were captured, they were taken as prisoners, and you had to offer quarter. no quarter is a war crime. That's why there were a number of famous prosecutions of the Nazis executing downed American airmen in the European theater in World War II, and the commanding officers were executed for the German ones were executed for carrying out those massacres. Right? I mean, so it is very clear. Anybody, and certainly any high-ranking officer, or for that matter, any member of the military knows this.
Will there be consequences to this? I mean, it seems, like I said, the double tap thing seems to be the issue.
Hegseth is nervous right now, right? I mean, if I'm Donald Trump, we know how Donald Trump is assessing the situation. Is Hegseth worth more to me in office or not? The pros and the cons are: if I fire him, do I look weak, or am I ridding? I mean, certainly I'm ridding myself of a pain in the ass, a person who's erratic and not really the right person for the job. Maybe he got me as far as he can go, and now I'm done with him. But whenever you have to fire someone for fucking up, you always look weak. But if I don't fire him, is this like a slow burning scandal? That's what he's weighing. Now, it's he's going to make sort of a intuitive decision, because that's what Trump does. By the way, I don't necessarily have a problem with that. I think intuition is an underrated instinct, but he's going to decide that. That's going to happen if it happens today or tomorrow morning. It's going to happen like after.
Do you think it's going to be that soon?
Time today, or if he survives the weekend, because you and I both know about the Friday afternoon media dump,
right?
So basically, that happens if Hegseth makes it, and he's still sec def by Sunday afternoon, he's safe for the time being. But he is a fuck up. I mean, the thing that makes me really feel like he's really up against the wall is because of the timing of the Inspector General's report about the signal stuff.
Signalgate, right?
That's coming out at the same time. And if I'm Donald Trump, I mean, so either that was released and timed in order to sort of, give him the 1-2 punch, the rope-a-dope, or it's like, or it's just a bad coincidence. But either way, it's like, oh yeah, this is this guy. This guy, he keeps fucking up. So, and I mean, it is Hegseth's responsibility. I mean,
yes, it is.
Whether he can try to pin it on the admiral all he wants, and even his response, Trump cares about the messaging. I mean, come on. The fog of war remark was really some piss poor tea, even for a modern American administration, when he's like, well, what do you want us to do? We couldn't see. Okay, so the thing is, dude, if you can't see, you're not allowed to fire. Okay, that's the rules. That's the rules of engagement, right? You're not allowed to fire. So,
and just for the audience,
could you see or could you not see?
Well, just so the audience will know, Hegseth pointed out, well, I only stayed for the first part. And he then said, well, it was a fog of war. So, I couldn't see. Now, that's not what's coming out of Congress. What's coming out of Congress was these were high-resolution images where they had effectively magnified.
No fog, no clouds, clear day.
There was no fog. No, they were clearly clinging to their life.
Can literally read the date on a penny. I mean,
yes.
Really. Mm-hmm.
Hegseth comes out and tries to throw it on Bradley. He tries to put it on Bradley.
Yeah, and effectively says, that's poor too. It's really poor.
Yeah. He says, let's make one thing clear. Admiral Mitch Bradley is an American hero, a true professional, has my 100% support. I stand by him, the combat decisions he has made on September 2nd mission and other since. Yeah, hey man, I'm standing by you by not standing by you. I'm throwing you under the bus.
Man. It was happy hour.
He says, America is fortunate to have such a man protecting us. When the Department of War says we have the back of our warriors, we mean it. As he does everything in his power to distance himself from Bradley's choice. He's effectively saying, hey, Bradley made this choice all on his own. I didn't have anything to do with this choice. Mm-hmm. Bradley decided to do that double tap. This had nothing to do with me, but I stand by Bradley nonetheless. That's what he's saying.
What a fucking disgusting weasel.
That's what he's saying.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's even if, like, let's put this, I mean, let's just to put this in its proper color, right? If, let's just say Bradley had gone rogue and done this on his own. And then Hegseth came back and said, "What the fuck did you do?" He still should take the fall for it. It's still Hegseth's responsibility. That's military culture.
Or is it Trump's? I mean, Trump is the one who effectively said, "Hey, go out and murder people in boats."
Well, it is Trump's. I mean, of course it is. I mean, if you have this kind of insane policy, we just be blowing people up just because we can on the high seas. And then, I mean, this kind of thing is going to happen eventually, right? I mean, look, where did we get the term double tap? It's from the drone wars in Pakistan, in the northwest tribal areas, Baluchistan, all those places, and like where it was Waziristan, and like I've been there, I know what it's like. And basically, what is a double tap strike? The double tap strike, and the Israelis love their double tap strike. So first you blow something up. Then all the first, concerned good Samaritans, passersby, and first responders, ambulance workers, doctors, nurses, they respond to try to help. And then, aren't we fucking clever and funny, sitting in our trailer in the desert in Nevada? Then we hit them again. That's the double tap. And it's like, everyone agrees that even if the first attack is legal, the second attack is not legal. Like in trench warfare, it was illegal to kill the medic who went out to try to, help the fallen soldier. I mean, we know these things. We don't have to relearn them. And, I think part of the problem here, Jamal, is that, in our generation, very few Americans have served in the military or close to people who have. And so, I don't think this stuff could have happened in 1955 when everyone was a veteran or knew a veteran. Everyone knew about war. They knew what it was. They knew the basic rules. Now nobody does. And so it's kind of like, there you are, like, I work at the auto shop. I'm a cartoonist. I'm a podcaster. I mean, and I think that's really seriously what's going on here. The level of disgust would be much higher. Like, like if I say, like, oh, I know this is true. I know a cartoonist who repeatedly traces his own old cartoons, or actually copies them, Xeroxes them, and then just changes the caption and sends it out like it's a new cartoon. And in cartooning, if you tell that to other cartoonists, they're like, "Oh my God, that's disgusting. Like that person should be killed." It's like, but you're like, you're not a cartoonist. You don't know.
Yeah, I don't know any better.
That's
right.
against the rules. That's wrong.
Yeah.
And like, so similarly, people used to know the military rules, and they don't know them now.
Yeah, this is depraved. This is just so depraved. Ted, man, I thank you for this. Always appreciate you joining me.
Thank you, Jamal. Always so
breakdown.
much fun. Anytime.
Ted Raw, political cartoonist, syndicated columnist, co-host of TMI with the one and only Manila Chan. Also deprogrammed with John Kiriakou. Ted, you be safe. You have a fantastic rest of your day, man.
Have a good weekend. By the way, you might want to wipe your lens. You just got foggy.
Okay. I see. Oh, okay. Thank you for that.
All right, sure.
Have a good one, man. Be safe.
You too. Happy weekend.
All right. Let's fix this. There we are. And I hear my next guest in the background. We are joined Shoban Saxena. How you doing, Shoban? You doing okay today?
Hi, Jamal. I'm fine. How are you? How are you doing?
I am doing well. I am better that you are joining me. Let me fix the audio a bit. There we are. I'm Shoban Saxena. He's an Indian journalist based out of Sao Paulo, Brazil since 2012. As a foreign correspondent, he has reported from the Times of India, the Indian Express, The Wire, DD India News Channel. Currently, he is a contributor to The Hindu, one of the biggest newspapers in India. His work focuses on Brazilian politics, economy, and culture, and India-Brazil relations. He has done considerable reporting and writing on the BRICS group also. Shoban, you are the person I want to talk to. I was watching Prime Minister Modi and Vladimir Putin, bosom brothers, so happy together. Some of the pictures that are coming out of the location are just gets across that the relationship between the two is not necessarily going anywhere, or at the very least, that's what they want to get across, that the relationship is not going anywhere, despite the pressure that is being applied to it by the United States. I showed these images to the audience a little bit earlier, Where is it? I just had these things up right here. All right, so I showed these images to the audience a little bit earlier of these two meeting at the airport. Modi gets out, hugs Putin almost immediately, breaks protocol in doing so, but nevertheless, again, they're getting across something specific in regards to the relationship between Russia and India. They look happy as a lark. Here's another one,
Yeah, no.
hugging him at the airport. And of course, walking. They roll out the red carpet. There's that. What do you think the main thrust of this conversation was about between these two? What was the point of this meeting in this regard?
Thanks again, Jamal, for the invitation. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. I think we have to look at this visit of President Putin to India in three different contexts, which are actually all connected to each other. The first, of course, is the relationship between India and Russia. And as Prime Minister Modi today said when he was during a reception for President Putin, that India-Russia relationship is the polar star of international relations. What does it mean? It means that this relationship has not changed despite all the changes, despite all the turbulence in the geopolitical scenario. You know, going back to 1947 when India became independent, and through the 50s, 60s, 90s, turbulent time for both India and Russia. Now we're in 2025, but the relationship stands very, very strong. Of course, the focus of the visit is now trade, defense ties, energy relations, and also very strong people-to-people relations between India and Russia. That is the focus. The second context, of course, is the emergence of BRICS countries. As you know, I mean, both India and Brazil, India and Russia, and Brazil and China and South Africa, and other countries make part of the BRICS group of countries. And BRICS has really become a very important player in the geopolitical, in the international affairs. So that is, again, we have to look at this relationship, this visit in the context of the new multipolarity, a new multipolar world which is emerging. And India and Russia, they make very important poles of this new emerging world order. And the third, of course, is the decline of the Western world. You know, I mean, US, Europe, they are receding. The whole world is realizing, this visit is happening amid a lot of pressure from Europe, from US, on both India and Russia, not to go ahead with the defense deals. And we're still waiting for details of the defense deals. But what I'm hearing so far from Delhi is I think there's going to be a major deals on S-400 missiles, probably Su-57, or deal on Su-30, Sukhoi 30 jet aircraft is already being signed. It will be manufactured in India. A lot of good things happen. I think we're going to get more details in the coming days. But if you look at all this context, how the strengthening of relationship between India and Russia, and the emergence of BRICS, and now in the context of the Western world losing its strength, losing its power, and new countries like India and Russia and BRICS now guiding the multipolar world.
I'm curious on something else in regards to what did they agree upon? I saw that there were certain agreements in regards to fuel, in regards to free trade area that they were supposed to, I guess, try to bring into fruition. What else were these agreements that they were effectively making? I saw even things like nuclear reactors, like small nuclear reactors that apparently Russia was supposed to be building for India.
Yeah, energy is a major sector because India has been importing a lot of petroleum oil from Russia since the start of the Ukraine war, despite all the pressure coming from the US and the tariffs imposed by Donald Trump and the pressure from European Union. So I think that is going to continue. That is very, very important development. And India is going to continue to buy petroleum from Russia. India is also going to sign, I think they already signed, civil nuclear a deal under which the Russians can go to set up. I'm sorry, I think there's some sound in the background. Is bothering you?
No,
No,
I can't hear it.
Okay. Okay. So civil nuclear deal between India and Russia. So energy is a major factor. Another thing is India and Russia have decided to enhance their bilateral trade to $70 billion by 2030. Another major development. Defense relationship are going to increase more and more. There have been a lot of chatter about Su-57, which is a fantastic fighter jet Russia is going to offer to India. We haven't heard final word about it as yet, but there are chances that Russia may offer to India not just manufacturing but also technology transfer to manufacture this fighter jet in India. So energy, trade, and defense relationship, and Russia has wants a lot of skilled workers from India to go and work in Russia. That is very important for India. India has a lot of skilled manpower, but the job situation tends to be very complicated in India. So I think if Indian skilled workers can go to Russia, as they're facing a lot of pressure in the US, all this problem with H-1B visa and Donald Trump cracking down on immigration. So that opens another door for Indian skilled workers. That's also a very, very important development. So I think, if we look at it's a spectrum of India-Russia relation now. It's really fantastic, from energy, trade, defense relation, and manpower, and people relations as well.
The pressure from the United States, I have to believe that part of this visit has to do with, let's say, India's response to the pressure coming out of the United States. I don't believe for a moment that this came out of a vacuum. Maybe it did come out of a vacuum. Maybe this visit had been planned years in advance, but I don't buy that. I strongly suspect that this, either the tariff pressure, the oil pressure, all of these pressures that the United States was effectively going after India. Because, by the way, they weren't going after China. If you notice, Donald Trump didn't even bring up oil in the context of China. He brought this stuff up in the context of India, considering India to be a weak link in the way that he's effectively thinking about it. Is this, or do you agree with that? Do you agree that this meeting and, let's say, the closeness that Modi was projecting in regards to the relationship between Russia and India, that this is also directed at the US, effectively saying, look, you're not breaking us. You're not changing the context of this relationship.
Jamal, very interestingly, one day before President Putin arrived in Delhi, the ambassadors of UK, Germany, and France, they wrote a joint op-ed in the Times of India, and kind of warning India against getting close to Russia. But this is against all diplomatic norms. And another newspaper, Indian Express, which used to be a great newspaper once upon a time, not anymore, they interviewed the Deputy Foreign Minister of Poland, and he also warned India, talking all these, same Ukraine and Russia, all the talking points we know about. So this is a blatant interference in the internal affairs of India, and using Indian media platform, which is shameful, really. And then the Russian ambassador to India, Denis Alipov, he wrote an article, an op-ed in Times of India. He kind of countering that argument, because the India-Russian relations are independent of India's relationship with any other country, whether it's the US or Europe or China or any other country. And as a sovereign country, India has a right to choose how to deal with its partners, whether it's China, whether it's Russia or US. So I think that the Americans are playing these games, or Europeans trying to, put India in a spot, in an embarrassing situation by, Russia is not a democracy. All these points we know quite well now. Past 4 years, they have been kind of doing this propaganda. But this pressure is not going to work against India. If you pressure India, if you challenge India's sovereignty, if you interfere in India's domestic affairs, or if you tell Indians to do this or that, it's not going to work. It has never worked. We have seen in the past 4 years, since the war started in Ukraine, they put a lot of pressure on India not to buy oil from Russia, not to buy weapons from Russia, not to, when Prime Minister Modi went to Russia, again, they made a lot of, noise about it. And so all this pressure is there, but I think the optics coming from New Delhi today and yesterday are very, very clear that, if you put pressure on India, it's going to backfire. India, as an independent sovereign country, will choose its partner. India will work according to the national interests of India. I think the foreign minister, Dr. Jaishankar, has said it many times, again and again, that what is important for India is India's national interest. India will enter in partnership with other countries based on its national interests. End of the story. So they can, I'm sure, behind the scenes, a lot of pressure. I mean, they wrote this op-ed, a shameful event, but it's not going to work. It hasn't worked, and it's not going to work. Even the tariffs imposed by Donald Trump in India, he hiked it to 50% because India was buying petroleum from Russia. Hasn't worked. Indian GDP has grown by 8.2% in the last quarter. 8.2%. Yeah, and the year-on-year growth will be 7% this year. So of course, there's a setback because India imports almost 8 to 9% of its exports go to US. So there's a setback there, but it's not affecting India's economy in the way all suspected that it will affect.
But India may not always be able to play this role of dancing between the raindrops. And what I mean by that is, it's a saying that I have. What I mean by that is, the United States may not give India this option of doing both, because that seems to be what the United States is effectively trying to do, to say, hey, you need to make a choice. Or is that not the way India looks at this? That for all intents and purposes, they believe they can balance these powers, whether it's China and Russia, or for that matter, where it's, well, I don't think China and Russia is a balance, but in the context of the United States and Russia, that India can balance both of these things.
I think one big problem in the Western countries still have this Cold War mentality. They believe in the zero-sum game. If you're getting
Yes.
close to one country, it is at the cost of other countries. I mean, that's not the mindset. That is not the history of Indian foreign policies, and Indians don't work like that. I mean, Indians have said it again and again that our foreign policy is multi-alignment. We deal with everyone. India has a very good relationship with the US. It doesn't mean that if US has having problem with Russia, that India needs to scale down relationship with Russia. That's ridiculous, and
Come on. Like that is not being, that is the determining factor of that. It's not India. Like if you and I are friends, but it could be a means girl club, right? Like if you and I are buddies, and I'm friends with your wife, and you break up with your wife, you may not be okay with me being friends with your wife after that.
Of course,
I'm saying, and I'm using it in the context of the U.S. relationship. The United States could say, "Hey, you need to choose," and India can't turn to the U.S. and say, "Well, hey, man, we're going to do both." That can be forced.
The international relations are different from interpersonal relations. The relations between countries are very interestingly, a few years ago, 2020, India had a problem with China. There was a kind of conflict between India and China. 20 soldiers died on both sides, and some other numbers on Indian side and Chinese side. So what was the response of the US and Europe? Did they come to India's rescue? Did they snap the relationship with China to support another democracy? No, they continued the trade relations with China. They continued the relationship with China. So now they tell India that, oh, if you back Russia, so in the future, if you have problem with China, we may not be able to support you. So Dr. Jaishankar said it very clearly, but we had a problem with China before, and you didn't support us. You to expect another country to cut off relationship or scale down relationship because you are having problem with it, I think it's expecting too much, and it doesn't work like this. I mean, what is important for India as a sovereign country, like any other country, is to protect its national interest. That's what Americans do. That's what Europeans do. So why do you expect India to behave differently? And the Russia-Ukraine war, I mean, India has nothing to do with it. We are not part of Europe. This war is happening in Europe, and India as a responsible member of the international community has said it again and again that this conflict needs a diplomatic solution.
Right.
So make this argument that you're buying Russian petroleum, and that's why you are supporting the Russian war effort is a ridiculous argument.
It
The
is.
Americans have done so many wars in the Middle East and Afghanistan, then the whole world should just snap, cut off relationship with them, because if you doing business with America, it means you're supporting the war in Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, and now threatening war in Venezuela. Things don't work like that, because we have good relationship with Russia going back 70 years, more than 70 years, and we're not going to destroy that relationship because some third country is having problem with Russia. And also, I think the Indian foreign policy is quite sensible to put this Russia-Ukraine war in the proper context. We know what's happening. We know about the expansion of NATO. It has come to the doorstep of Russia. The big countries have a different mindset. India may not be the superpower, but India is a big country, and we have a lot of problem with in our neighborhood. So if somebody wants to put a naval base or military base in Pakistan, India will have big problem with that. So if NATO wants to establish itself in Ukraine, which is at the doorstep of Russia, as a big power, as a big country, Russia has a legitimate security concerns about it. I think we Indians understand this point. So it's this argument of Ukraine is a democracy and Russia is an autocracy, and autocracy attacking democracy. I mean,
Yeah.
this is beyond ridiculous. I mean, they have spun it so much and so many times it doesn't make any sense. We have seen this movie so many times. War in Iraq in the name of democracy, war in Afghanistan in name of human rights, and now again they're planning a war on Venezuela in the name of fighting drugs and bringing democracy. I think they should stop. We have seen this film so many times. When they bring democracy, it means death and destruction. Everybody understands it, and that is why like the discussions going in between US and Russia directly, and Europe has been sidelined in this all these negotiations about Ukraine, because people know that they are not interested in peace. They are not interested in resolving this issue. Only thing they're interested is in war themselves, and that is why these ambassadors of three countries, European countries, wrote this op-ed in the biggest newspaper in India, just to create confusion in the minds of the people of India. But it's not going to work. It has not worked, and it's not going to work.
By the way, on that, RT India is coming into fruition.
I'm sorry?
RT India is coming into fruition. Apparently, RT
Yeah.
India is starting in India. That's
It-
big.
It's launched
Yeah.
today. It was launched today by President Putin in Delhi. And RT America got shut down, RT Europe got shut down.
Yeah.
All these are great democracies which believe in freedom of expression and human rights, and open media and free media. They shut down RT in the country. But I think this also shows the courage and independence of Indian policy, that RT America has opened a studio in Delhi. They're going to broadcast 4 bulletins a day, and I think they're not going to cover domestic politics. It will be focused on foreign policy and geopolitics. But
Yeah.
they already started broadcasting from India. I think it's a fantastic news, and I think the narrative constructed by BBC and CNN and all these news outlets, it will be challenged in a very substantial manner.
Yeah, we used to cover foreign policy constantly, and they never understood that. Like when you're working at Sputnik, for example, you're covering world news, you're covering international politics, and so you're looking at countries all across the globe. You don't have you may cover domestic politics, but even your domestic politics has all of this context of what is happening around the globe, especially in the context of what the United States is doing around the globe. And of course, NBC doesn't really do that. Like, CNN doesn't really do that. It's different. India and China, you mentioned India and China, and I want to hit that for a moment. A question was asked to Peskov about whether Russia would leverage. Peskov didn't answer this question all that well, but the fact that the question was asked is fascinating to me, because I suspect Peskov didn't answer it well because Peskov was blindsided by the question on some level, because it would have never occurred to me. But as you pointed out, the European countries are saying, hey, if things go bad between you and China, maybe we won't help you in the context of that conflict. Now, Peskov was effectively asked if there is some kind of conflict between Russia and China, between China and India, would Russia, let's say, lean on the side of China to give China some kind of decisive advantage? I'm fascinated by that question because it never occurred to me that these two countries would be at loggerheads. Both of these countries are in BRICS. Both of them have tried to, let's say, bury the hatchet in regards to the issues that they've dealt with. Russia seems to be an intermediator in between these two things. It never occurred to me, but is that one of the foreign policy things on India's mind? I don't know I don't focus, like talked about, on Indian foreign policy. So this is a blind spot for me. So this question could be something that is firmly within the context of Indian foreign policy and the way that India thinks about their foreign policy and, let's say, difficulties that they may have with China in the future, regardless of, let's say, peacemaking that is taking place now. Is that a normal point of view of India, that at some point they will be at loggerheads once again with China, and that there may be some kind of conflict between these two countries?
Well, as they say, enemies is your friend, but also they're saying that a friend is your friend too.
Right,
And
right.
Dr. Jaishankar, he said something to that effect, talking about Russia and China. Russia and China have a good friendship. So if we have good friendship with Russia, that also means we can have good relationship with China. 2020, as I mentioned before, when India and China had this conflict at the border, where was the matter resolved? In Moscow. The foreign ministers of India, Dr. Jaishankar and Wang Yi, the foreign minister of China, they met Mr. Lavrov in Moscow and they signed a pact. And a matter was resolved according to the pact. So Russia has played not just the role of a mitigator, but a balancing power between India and China. Now, as we all know, Russia has this no limits friendship or relationship with China. I think Russia is elevating relationship with India to that extent, no limits. And at the recent SCO conference in Tianjin in China, when Prime Minister Modi, President Putin, and President Xi Jinping met, and the photo was taken of them together, and it created a lot of fear and around the world, especially in the Western countries. So I don't think a conflict between India and China is imminent, or is that India wants a war with China or China wants a conflict with India. Of course, yeah. The fact is, India and China have a dispute about the border, but it's also a fact that today China is the biggest, if not the biggest, one of the biggest trading partners of India. And in relationship between the two countries are improving. I think after 5 years, the Indian flights are again going to China. Chinese flights will be going to India. The trade is going to increase more. Of course, the balance is in favor of China, but I think it's also an opportunity for Indian firms to do more business with China. So, to think that, there'll be, again, this is the zero-sum game mentality. If there's a war between India and China or conflict, what will Russia do? I think it is a way of putting Russia in a spot. I think things don't work in international relations like that. India has a good relationship with Russia. China has a good relationship with Russia. That also gives Russia a lot of leverage with both India and China. I think, and both countries realize that, because whenever there's some tension between India and China, the Western countries, especially US, they want to sell more weapons to India. Oh, you having problem with China? Take our weapons, because they would like it very much to have India and China go to war with each other or have some big disturbance in the region. I think they'll be very happy about it. But what is India's focus right now? What is China's focus right now? What is Russia's focus right now? What is the focus of BRICS countries? Is development. Because all these countries, and that is a problem with the West, because the West has stopped doing what they used to do best: welfare schemes, welfare policies for the countries. Now, the BRICS countries, including Brazil and South Africa, others are trying to do that. I don't think they are thinking in terms of having a war, because a war will set back the economies by 20 years, 30 years. Nobody wants a war. And if you can resolve your differences with diplomacy, with peace, with trade. Why should you go to war with? The only people who talk of war all the time are the Europeans, and Americans actually do it. Nobody's talking about war in India or in
Mhm.
China, or Russians don't want a war in our region. This is the first time I think we have a lot of peace in Asia. And who's doing all the wars in Asia are the outside powers. And that's been the history of Asia from Korea to Vietnam to Iraq to, even the bombing of Iran and what's happening in Gaza. It's been
Yeah.
done by the Europeans and Americans, not by the Asians.
Well, to be fair, it was a Indian journalist that asked that question.
Yeah, must be, yeah, I think must be the English language press in India tend to be very, very pro-Western.
Okay.
I know it myself because when I worked with Times of India for donkey years, and I used to write an article on BRICS, and my editors were always very skeptical about it. They ask you, why are you so hot about BRICS? Why do you want to write about BRICS? BRICS is going to, this was back in 2010-11 when I was still living in India.
Uh-huh.
And I wrote an article about the BRICS Bank. And in BRICS Bank had been launched at the time. And I wrote an article way back in 2011 that this is the future and World Bank is going to decline. And World Bank president was in India. Paul Wolfowitz was in India at the time. And my editor, he didn't really like it. He kind of, and he made it very clear to me. He said, you were dreaming about BRICS. BRICS is going to finish, it's not going to work. And I think I look back with some amount of glee, actually.
Yeah, because you were right. He was wrong. I'm curious on something. How do you deal with that? Because I got to be honest, when I got pushback on a topic that I was covered, I didn't take the pushback well, especially when I knew I was right. Like, meaning if I'm covering a story, and Gaza was it. Most of the time, you got free reign. Like, if you covered something, you covered something. That was just kind of the way it worked. On the Gaza issue, there was people were walking on eggshells. And I was covering the story on the rapes, effectively saying, look, even the New York Times, who under normal circumstances go out of their way to give Israel a pass and leeway, even they are saying this cannot be validated. This is something they made up, cutting the heads off of babies and all this other stuff. This stuff was nonsense. They're using this to justify mass murder. And the editor flipped out. It was like, whoa, you can't say that. It's like, what do you mean I can't say that? It's true. It came out in the New York Times. Like, what do you mean? Why do I care that it came out in the New York Times? Dude, if the New York Times is reporting the story, then they're not reporting this because they want to report the story. They're reporting the story on some level because there is no evidence in order to back up this claim. And all of my co-hosts backed me, the producers backed me, the editor, not so much.
Yeah.
How did you deal with that? Like, did he let that story run when he disagreed with you at the bank, or did he just bitch about it?
Yeah, the story ran because I was a senior editor with the Sunday Times, the Sunday paper.
Okay.
So I didn't need to, take my all stories through the editor, So this is after the story is published. So he'll call me and say, mention a few. I said, I always argued, you have to look at a story logically. Does it make sense or not? Look at the quotes. Look at the people I've talked to. I was not writing some, giving some spiel. I was, I would talk to economists. I would talk to professors. I'll talk to diplomats, and then write a story. So you have to see that whether the story makes sense or not, And but I think the problem with this press in it, especially the English language newspapers, are they think they're very liberal, liberal in the Western sense, very pro-Western, and they're not really very excited about BRICS. Now it probably has changed over the years because they're seeing that the BRICS is really taking a concrete form. And on the other side, the state media actually, which does more justice to things like BRICS, but the private media in India, they're not. Like in Brazil also, I've never seen when anything BRICS meeting happens, the so-called mainstream media, they start publishing stories which got skeptical of the idea of BRICS. Oh, they're not going to have a declaration. They're not going to agree on so many things. India and China have this problem, that problem. So you know, and uh, and the major decisions taken are largely ignored by the mainstream media here, and so in India too. It is the alternative media, and I do a lot of work for alternative media in Brazil too, in Portuguese language, presenting India's point of view, and talking about India and China, other things, things which are not really published here. And people like you who do a lot of work about BRICS, but the mainstream media, again, they are, I think, ideologically very aligned with the Western way of thinking, or Western dominance, or Western ideology, the Western narrative, basically,
That
that
makes them
that
skeptical.
BRICS is some kind of talk shop and nothing happens, and the world is changing, Jamal, right in front of us in real time. And if you're not able to observe it and report about it, I think it's very, very unfortunate. And I think the Indian media uh, also suffers from this. And I think the launch of RT India is a very, very welcome development in that regard.
Yeah. Shoban, always appreciate you, man. You get fantastic breakdowns. I can see why you've been doing this for a very long time, and I appreciate you for doing it. Shoban
Thank you,
Saxena,
man.
he's an
And
Indian
sorry for the
journalist.
noise. Sorry for the some noise in the background. I think.
Oh, I can't hear
Yeah.
it. I swear to God, I can't hear it. The
Oh,
echo,
okay.
background noise, canceling, all that stuff has been doing damn good work.
Oh, okay.
Shoban Saxena, he's an Indian journalist based out of Sao Paulo, Brazil. I have a friend of mine that's there. She said it's warm there. It's like in the 80s. It is freezing here. I am so jealous. He has been in Sao Paulo, Brazil since 2012. As a foreign correspondent, he has reported for the Times of India, Times India Express, The Wire, DD India News Channel. Currently, he is contributor to The Hindu, one of the biggest newspapers in India. His work focuses on Brazilian politics, economy, and culture, and India-Brazil relations. He has done considerable reporting and writing on BRICS group also. Shoban, you have
Yeah,
a fantastic rest of your
just one last word. I spoke about the Indian media. The
Yep.
Hindu is an exception. It's a newspaper which gives a lot of importance to issues like BRICS, Global South, emerging countries, and the international coverage of this newspaper is excellent.
Oh, okay. Good to know. Do they run in Brazil or they just only run in India? They call it Hindu,
It's
so I'm
it's a
assuming they only run in India.
it's published from more than 15 centers across India, but they also have
Okay.
very good digital edition. And in fact, it's the first newspaper to launch a website in way back in 1997.
Oh, wow. So they've been out here for a while. They've been, what, more than
Yes,
30
yes,
years? Wow.
yes, yeah.
Siobhan, you enjoy the rest of your day, man. Thank you for this. You be safe, okay?
Thank you.
Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Always a pleasure.
And I see my man in the background, Dimitri Lascaris. How you doing, Dimitri? You doing okay today?
Doing well. How are you doing, brother? Nice to see
I
you.
am doing fine. I'm doing fine. Dimitri Lascaris, he's a lawyer, journalist, activist from Montreal, Quebec. He runs the damn good show, Reason to Resist. He has fantastic interviews. And he's been a damn good friend of the show. So thank you for this. I'll say it. My ex one day was like, he's very attractive. I was like, well, do you need his phone number? Do you want me to hit you up with his phone number? No, man. Thank you for joining me, man. I really appreciate it. Recently, there was a negotiation taking place between negotiators in India and Lebanon. I'm sorry, Israel and Lebanon. This was supposed to be somewhat of a big meeting because these were civilian negotiators. And the day after, India goes on a killing spree in Lebanon.
You said India. I think you meant Israel.
Israel. I'm sorry. Shoban covers India media. I'm sorry. Israel and Lebanon had a meeting. The civilian negotiators had a meeting between both sides. This was supposed to be somewhat of a big deal because apparently the civilians haven't negotiated for a while. The military had been negotiating. And a day later, after that negotiation, Israel goes on a killing spree. And this is one of the largest bombings that had taken place in southern Lebanon. What is going on with this? What is the message that it's trying to get across in this level of bombing? I'm going to pull up the video so people can see the level of bombing that was taking place. But one day later, obviously, this is not random right here. This is the attack that took place. I had Vanessa Beeley on the show yesterday, and before she got off the show, She sent me this video. What's being communicated here? And maybe that's a dumb question, but I'll go for there just as a starter.
I couldn't make out your question. You said what? I'm sorry. Could you
I said,
repeat
what is being communicated here? I mean, you have negotiations on one day, and then the very next day you go on a bombing raid. What's going on with this?
So let me start by saying I don't have any inside information, obviously, not in this case. And so I'm going to make an educated guess about what's going on here. I don't think it should be particularly controversial for those who've been paying attention to Israel's statements and its conduct in Lebanon. Israel's overall goal, and when we say Israel's overall goal, I must stress we're really talking about is the United States government's overall goal. It is to, because they're one and the same, they part company only on the margins. But fundamentally, they're trying to destroy any and all resistance to American hegemony in West Asia. And why is that happening? Because ever since, oil became essential to the functioning of the global economy, the American military and political elite have viewed West Asia as, they put it, the greatest material prize in human history and a source of stupendous strategic power. So at a time when Western power is in decline, from Afghanistan to Ukraine, Iran, China, the rise of China, they see this is kind of like a last gasp for the empire. Consolidate control over this part of the world. So that's the overall goal. And therefore, in Lebanon, the priority for the genocidal Israeli entity and its masters in Washington has been to disarm the resistance and effectively bring about its surrender. That has been the goal. And it's not just Hezbollah. Any armed resistance anywhere in the region to U.S. hegemony is intolerable to them. So they they tried many times, of course, to destroy Hezbollah. They've failed over decades to destroy Hezbollah. Even now, with all the decapitation strikes and flattening South Lebanon, they have not destroyed Hezbollah. So they tried to convince the Lebanese army to do the dirty work and effectively bring about a civil war. And they've set a deadline effectively of the end of this year. So it has become screamingly obvious, not only that the Lebanese army will not disarm Hezbollah by the end of the year, but it ain't going to disarm Hezbollah at all. So I think what happened in that meeting was the Israelis sought assurances, probably gave them an ultimatum, and said, either you commit to doing this and you start doing it now, or we're going to take matters into our own hands. So what happened on the following day, because they were told effectively, maybe in polite terms, that ain't happening. Yeah. We're not going to do it. We don't have the capacity to do it. We don't want to have a civil war in our country. We have to find another solution, a nonviolent solution. The Israelis said, oh, no, we're not having any of that. It's either our way or the hard way. And what we saw the day after is the hard way.
I think people mistaken a lot of killing for success, if that makes sense. And I know that sounds strange, but Israel did everything in its power to try to occupy various parts of southern Lebanon, meaning to move the ball forward, and weren't able to do it. Hezbollah took a lot of people died, but they were able to effectively withstand or push back, or at the very least hold Israel off from their advances. And it seems that, as you pointed out, Israel has come up with the choice of, okay, since we couldn't do this, we want you to have a civil war, and we want you to do this. And if you think about it, this is the same thing in Gaza, right? It's like, okay, well, we can't destroy Hamas, and so we can't do it. And because our military has been taking somewhat of a beating in the process of over these 2 years of trying to do so, we are now going to internationalize this and try to get the international community to do something that our military couldn't accomplish. And the same thing with Iran. We can't do this in a 12-day war. Yeah, sorry. It's like it's all of the enemies still exist.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think people are misreading what they consider to be Israeli success. At least that's my take on this. But give me your take, and this could be the last question on this because I want to get to Russia for a moment.
Sure. Well, when you say people think this, I'd just put a little finer point on it. Zionists think this. They think that mass murder equates with military victory. I'm fond of telling the story that back in 1990, unfortunately his name escapes me, not in 1990, but it was some 28 years ago, the Israelis killed the predecessor to Hassan Nasrallah in less than a year. He was in the position of Secretary General, and they killed him, by the way, in typical psychopathic fashion. He was in a car with his wife and his young son, and they fired a Hellfire missile into it and killed the entire family, burned the little boy alive. And what happened? Hassan Nasrallah became the Secretary General of Hezbollah, and Hezbollah became a far more potent force than it had ever been. So if that didn't teach them the lesson that decapitation strikes, oftentimes they're what they call decapitation strikes, backfire, nothing will. I mean, so they just keep doing the same thing over and over again. And, sometimes they weaken the organization for a time. Sometimes they end up making the organization more militant. But one lesson is clear: that does not equate to military victory, nor does the mass murder of civilians. And so I don't think Israel is any closer to dominating the region today than it was before all of this horror began.
And now they're going after the Ayatollah, apparently, where apparently there are reports that they're trying to murder him in this case, which, beware. This is a buyer beware thing. Yeah. Buyer beware.
The last thing Israeli people need is for Netanyahu to succeed in that goal. That will be an absolute disaster for Israel. You can be sure that there will be no restraint shown by the Iranian Revolutionary Guards.
And you think, despite Pezeshkian, and I'm saying despite Pezeshkian because I consider him to be a very weak link in regards to Iranian resistance.
Yeah, I don't think Pezeshkian is going to be able to restrain national anger, and he's certainly not going to be able to restrain the military of Iran if they go to that extreme.
Yeah. I would like to go to Russia for a moment. Are you ecstatic that we are on the brink of peace with the Russians in the Ukraine war at this point? Trump has put out his 28-point peace plan. Ushakov mentioned it was 27 points, so Russian immediately got rid of one of the points. I'm enamored by various people who think that this brings us closer to some kind of deal. Give me your take on this. Do you think this brings us closer to some kind of deal or not so much?
I just published a long monologue about this thing, which I called the 28-point peace prank. And as I explained at the outset of my piece, I was trying real hard to ignore this fucking circus because, as soon as it was released, the way the whole story begins is on November 18th, Axios publishes a scoop. It calls it a scoop, right? Yep. So I was busy keeping the spotlight, or trying to keep the spotlight on our program on the genocide in Gaza, which, as Amnesty declared a few days ago, is ongoing. It's not stopped. And so I saw these reports. I didn't even bother looking at the Axios article. All I heard was that there was this, the same characters who had worked on the 20-point Gaza peace plan, which is itself a fraud, were the authors of this thing. Okay. And so I knew it was going to end in frustration and stupidity, and that there was going to be a feeding frenzy in the corporate media. And unfortunately also, let's be frank, in the alternative media too. And so I just ignored the damn thing. And I got fed up. I got absolutely fed up because I kept seeing over and over again in the alternative media. And in my report, I'm not going to name them on your program, but I named them in my program.
You can name them. Name names. I love it when people name names.
And by the way,
I love it when people name names.
This is not an exhaustive list. But these are probably the biggest platforms that have put ad nauseum have embraced the idea that Donald Trump really wants to end the war in Ukraine. Okay, which
I don't get. I don't get these.
Neither do I.
I call this a dead letter the moment that it came out, and I think I was joking. And so, one of the parts is Russian money is going to be stolen and used to give Trump a kickback
Yeah,
on
yeah,
some
yeah.
kind of deal. And it's like, okay, are you serious right now?
Yeah.
Are you being serious?
And
You
they
provoked a war.
make Trump the president of another peace council. The guy,
Yeah.
the genocidal maniac, is a party to the war with Russia. Okay, always has been. Back to his first administration, he's laid the groundwork for this war, and they're going to put him in charge. I mean, this thing was a joke from the very beginning. I didn't even know any of this, by the way, Jamal. When I saw the first reports about what the Axios scoop, I didn't bother reading the 28 points. I just like, this is ridiculous. It's a waste of time. Okay, so then I started watching the alternative media, and Glenn Greenwald puts out a report saying, oh, yes, the Donald really wants peace, but those nasty neocons and the deep state and the Europeans, the Ukraine. So then comes George Galloway. George Galloway just unambiguously, and by the way, I have a lot of respect for all these people I'm going to name.
I love Galloway, by the way.
Absolutely.
But I can't believe Galloway was fooled by this.
It's funny because I've watched the evolution in his thinking. He was saying this when Trump first came back to the White House, and then he started expressing doubt. Oh, I'm not so sure that that Trump wants Ukraine. But now he's back to absolute confidence. I saw this on the Duran. Now, to the credit of the Duran, I talk about this in my report. When they assessed what's going on, they started out by saying that the negotiations between the Ukrainians and the Americans is kabuki theater, because ultimately the Ukrainians are going to do whatever the Americans tell them to do. Right. I mean, they're completely dependent on the United States, and Zelensky's corrupt and all the rest of it. But then the explanation they give for why they're engaged in this kabuki theater, that Trump is engaged in this kabuki theater, is because he's got all these enemies in Washington he's got to deal with. And so he's trying to bring the Ukrainians along so that at least optically they'll say, I mean, I don't even understand any of this theory. But at the end of the day, it comes down to the same thing. Trump wants peace. The neocons don't, and the deep state doesn't, and the Europeans. Everybody else is to blame. Everybody else to blame but Donald Trump. And then finally there was Daniel Davis. Same thing. Exactly.
Really? Davis also.
Absolutely. So I just went off in my program. I mean, dudes, the man is a genocidal psychopath. He's just creating havoc all over the world. In the Caribbean, he went to war with Iran. No predecessor did that. Like I said, I recommend to people a great article by Will Shriver called The Imaginary Peace President on his Substack, which I talk about in my report. And he goes through in gory detail what Trump did during the first administration in Ukraine. Okay. And then you have the genocide in Gaza. You have the destruction of South Lebanon. You have Syria, cavorting with the head chopper al-Jolani. You have the saber rattling. I mean, they're openly talking, military officials in the U.S. about war with China. They seem to be trying to get Japan to become their version of the Ukrainian proxy in the South Pacific. I could go on and on. Why would any rational human being think that Donald Trump, who is murdering people all over the world and creating havoc all over the world, has carved out an exception for Ukraine? Oh, I'm going to be the man of peace. I'm going to bring an end to all the suffering. This is lunacy. Yeah.
I don't think Trump cares one iota about Ukrainians. I think Trump cares about Ukraine collapsing and him effectively holding the bag for a failed war. So let me cut it this way. I think what Trump wants is peace, but on American terms, which means you don't want peace at all because you're not getting American terms in a war that you lost, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, all right, we'll have peace if Putin jumps off the Kremlin. Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, dude, that's not happening. Like, if that's your terms, then these aren't real terms. And that's kind of how I feel about the 28-point peace plan. It's like many of these provisions are nonsense. Like, it's just ridiculous. It's a Minsk 3.0 that the Russians are never going to accept. Yeah. And so you are presenting something that is a dead letter with this idea that, okay, well, maybe we can sucker the Russians into accepting another Minsk.
Yeah, but they didn't actually do that. They didn't actually present the 28-point peace prank as a firm offer. What they did was they floated it, and then they said, now we're going to go present it to the Ukrainians, who are going to water it down and make it even worse. It was already inevitable. We didn't talk about the fact that that this plan apparently had a NATO-style guarantee that the Americans were saying under this plan, an attack on Ukraine would be viewed as an attack on the entire transatlantic military alliance. That sounds like Article 5 of NATO to me, which is exactly what the Russians have ruled out. And there's more. And they don't get Kherson and Zaporozhye under this plan. They have to just put up with sacrificing the large parts of those oblasts that they don't control. This thing was dead on arrival before they spoke to Zelensky, and then after they spoke to Zelensky's cronies in Florida, it got worse. That's
Yeah.
what happened. So, and who knows what's in that stupid plan now? I mean, it doesn't matter. It's not even close to what the Russians have demanded.
Yeah, and they're accomplishing the objectives on the battlefield. So it's like, obviously, the Ukrainian military is getting weaker day by day by day. Pokrovsk is just falling, Volchansk is just falling, Seversk most likely will be next, or Leningrad might be next, who knows. But meaning the ability for Ukraine to resist is getting weaker as we speak, right? They're $50 billion in debt. Europe is doing everything in their power to steal Russian money. The ECB just told them no. Belgium has just told them no. And so it's like, okay, so you can't even fill the budget shortfall. There's political turmoil that's taking place that seems to be motivated by the United States now to put pressure on Zelensky, that have gotten rid of Yermak and many of the other people that are around Zelensky. And I forget the woman's name. I think it's Pavlograd, I believe her name is, where she was pointing out that like 70 different officials are under pressure in regards to Nabu and Seppo. This is not a recipe for success. So it's like, why on earth would the Russians accept a nonsense deal like this? Yeah, it's nonsense. I would say one thing though, Zelensky does on some level have agency, and it's agency because I do think from Trump's point of view, he is petrified of making it look as if he forced Zelensky to accept the deal. At least that's my take. I could be wrong, and tell me if you think I'm wrong on that. Like, meaning Trump on day one could have walked. He could have just said, I'm out. I'm done. This is not my war. Joe Biden's war. I'm gone. Europe could maintain the war. Ukraine could maintain the war. The war would have stopped. Meaning if that's what he really wanted to do to end the war, that's how you end the war. All this other stuff is theater. This is something else. And it's something else that the Russians are not necessarily going to accept. But give me your take on that. Do you think Zelensky has any kind of agency in this process? Or do you think it's, well, the U.S. tells them what to do and they do it? If he tells them to jump, they say how high?
You know, I don't know that everything he says and does is micromanaged by Washington. So yeah, maybe on the margins, as I said, he has some room for maneuver. But anything that is going to, have a significant impact, let me put it this way, on U.S.-Russia relations, is going to get cleared from Washington. So, for example, when the Ukrainians went out during this latest theater and started destroying tankers in the Black Sea, that was a very provocative thing to do. Two Russian, what they call the shadow fleet of Russia, get blown up in the Black Sea with all the negative environmental consequences. They have to rescue the crews. Then they took out a vessel, I think, that was transporting canola oil. And apparently there's another vessel they hit off the coast of Senegal. I don't know that it was the Ukrainians, but it was somebody associated with the West, I think we can say. Yeah. So all of this is extremely provocative. I think it meets the classic definition of terrorism. Even provoking the ire of Erdogan, was very upset that this happened off the Turkish coast. Do we actually think that Zelensky did all of that? Because it's being openly admitted that it was the Ukrainians, right? Without getting clearance from the U.S. military. I think he probably, he might have been directed to do it. He might have actually been, it might have even been the Americans who did it, or the British, right? And it pretended, or the French. But I'm sure that I can't believe that something that was that consequential to the success of this so-called peace initiative would have been done by Zelensky without American approval. And so why would Trump do that? He would do that. And to be clear, when I say that Trump doesn't want peace, and I think you probably agree with me on this, Jamal, I don't mean that he doesn't want a ceasefire. Okay, he may very well want a temporary ceasefire so they can rearm Ukraine, mobilize more soldiers, train those soldiers, rebuild fortifications along what is now the front line. Sure, he may want that, but there's going to be a resumption of the war later. The Russians understand this perfectly well, and that just ain't going to happen, right? So, again, I don't think we're necessarily micromanaging Zelensky, but if it has significant consequences for U.S.-Russia relations, Zelensky will not do it without an authorization from Washington, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I think Trump wants a deal on his own terms that would allow, let's say, a minimization of Russia's influence and power, and to con them in the same way that Minsk 1 and 2 were effectively a con. Like, I think there's a difference between like John Harmer points out, the difference between a short war and a long war. And it's like, okay, well, this is a short war. The long war is this kind of long-term effort to undermine Russia. And Ukraine is just the proxy for doing so. And if they can get away with effectively continuing to use it, they will. No, I totally agree with you on this. Why do you think alt media is giving Trump the benefit of the doubt? And look, I would, in full honesty, I was open to Trump. Like, that sounds weird. I wasn't open to any political party. I didn't like either. Trump was a flagrant liar that tried to overthrow the U.S. government. So from my point of view, he should be in a cage. But from the standpoint of ending the war, my thing was like, okay, if he indeed is open to doing this, and the other side are lunatics, let's see what he does. I give him time, give him space, right? But when it became clear, this is not what's happening, my point of view was, okay, obviously he's a liar. That's not what he's trying to do. If he was trying to do it, he could walk. He could threaten to walk. He could use the leverage of walking. I mean, for God's sake, he's putting tariffs on Europe as we speak and bullying Europe into buying like nearly $1 trillion in weapons that they may or may not buy. So this idea that the Europeans are these independent actors is nonsense. And so my thing was, at a certain point, I was like, okay, well, he's obviously lying. Why do you think alt media doesn't come to that assessment when they look at this? Why is Greenwald and Daniel Davis and all of these other guys looking at this thinking to themselves, well, Trump really wants to end it, but he's surrounded by neocons?
Yeah. Whom he appointed, by the way. Whom he appointed. Thank you. Before I answer your question, let me say that I went through a very similar evolution as you, Jamal. And the reason why, not because of Trump's first term, I think that he was a warmonger from day one in his first term, but because there was a ceasefire in Gaza when he came to the White House in January.
Yeah.
And Biden had been doing his own version of the Kabuki theater, the peace prank, for over a year. But he comes in and he affects a ceasefire. When I stopped giving the benefit of the doubt was in March, when Israel tore up the ceasefire in Gaza and began openly starving the civilian population, and Trump was justifying it. At that point, I knew that this was all a scam. So why are they doing it? I mean, there are three possibilities, it seems to me. And by the way, I don't think any of them is acting in bad faith. Okay. I think they actually believe, they've convinced themselves for some reason that Donald Trump really wants to end the war in Ukraine, bring a real peace, not just a ceasefire that's going to be cynically exploited. Yeah. One reason why they might be doing this, continuing to cling to this fantasy, is they got it wrong at a certain subconscious level. They know this is a questionable proposition. And if they admit it to their audience, it kind of will have a negative impact on their, shall we say, the esteem in which they're held by the audience. I personally don't think that that's true. I think you make mistakes as a journalist and you admit them, and people think you're more credible, right? So I don't know if that's it. That's one possibility. The second possibility is that they have weak analytical skills. But I don't think that's the case.
I don't think that's the case with McPherson, with what's his name. Yeah.
These are all sophisticated analysts, man. So I'm not buying that. I'm just throwing out possibilities. So the third one, and the one that seems to be to me most credible, based upon all of the things that they've said, is that there are other aspects of Trump's agenda that they like, and they're giving him the benefit of the doubt because they want to see him succeed on those aspects of his agenda. So, for example, they might like the fact that Trump is taking a hard line on illegal immigration. They might like the fact that Trump is obsessed with lowering taxes for the wealthy, primarily. They might like the fact that Trump is gutting regulation in the United States, just taking a hatchet to regulation. They might like his trade policy. They might think, we need to have tariffs and we need to force companies to repatriate to the United States. Who knows? And some of them, they've actually expressed support for certain aspects of Trump's agenda outside of the context of the Ukraine war. So I think that they really, really want to see Trump succeed for reasons that are unrelated to Ukraine. And so they're giving him the benefit of the doubt despite all evidence to the contrary. That's, I think, the most likely explanation. But hey, man, I can't read their minds.
Or they're true believers. I get the sense that McCurris is a true believer.
Well, Cristoforo definitely is. I think Alexander Mercouris is a little more skeptical than Cristoforo, but my sense is that they both ultimately just can't convince themselves that Trump is a warmonger.
Yeah. And by the way, again, from my point of view, I do think Trump wants a deal, but on U.S. terms, which makes it impossible. Like, I don't know if a U.S. president can accept Russia's effectively surrender document from the Russians. Hey, these are the core demands that we need. Mm-hmm. And the moment that the U.S. looks at it, they're like, yeah, we can't accept that, which means the war continues. Like, meaning it's one thing if Trump came out, put out the 28 peace plan, quote unquote, or prank plan as you call it, and the Russians said, "Okay, we'll accept that." Okay, he would probably accept that under those terms that ultimately is not going to end anything, because in the next 5 or 10 years you're going to end up with another war, which the Russians are never going to accept. I guess I think if there's any leeway in the way that I think we're thinking about this, I'm thinking about this in the sense that the U.S. realizes Ukraine is collapsing and that they will collapse. And that level of humiliation, not just for the United States, but for NATO, is overwhelming in the way that the U.S. thinks about it. And so they're trying to cover their ass by trying to put lipstick on a pig and saying, hey, I'm Trump. I said I was going to get a deal. Here's a fake deal, just like the fake ceasefire that took place in Gaza, or the fake, wars that he apparently stopped across the world. It's not that it's real. It's just his way of trying to get out of deep and unabiding humiliation for a war that the United States would have lost, and lost on his watch. Meaning, between him trying to get something versus Ukraine collapsing seems to be a worst case scenario from his point of view. But correct me if I'm wrong on that. If you think I'm wrong, let me know.
Well, I think he wants to convince American voters in particular that he was telling them the truth when he said that he wanted peace.
Yes.
I have a very simple explanation for what has happened here, Jamal. I don't know why people, at least don't in the alternative media, I know you would entertain this, but the people I've mentioned don't seem to be willing to entertain the obvious possibility that Trump lied from the very beginning. Why would he do that?
Right.
Why would he? Right. Why would the man who has a demonstrated history of being a pathological liar and a warmonger lie to the American people in the presidential election about bringing the Ukraine war to an end? Because he wanted votes. He simply wanted their votes, and so he created this expectation that he was going to do it within 24 hours, which was preposterous from the get-go. Yes, and he's heading into the midterms next year, and the Republicans are in serious trouble, as we saw in the most recent elections. So he's very concerned about his base being pissed off with him as it is for failing to bring this travesty to an end. So he's putting on a show to convince them that it's everybody else's fault. I'm trying real hard here. It's those damn Europeans, and it's that damn Zelensky, and the Russians are being maximalist. I'm the good guy. It's their fault. That's all this is, in my opinion. Agreed. That's the most plausible explanation for Trump's behavior.
Yeah, agreed. Pathological liar. Lie. As I always say, habitual liars lie. That's kind of what they do. Yeah, agree. Totally agree. Yeah, I don't know why media gives him the benefit of the doubt in the way they give him the benefit of the doubt, especially after everything that we've seen leading up to this point. So yeah, agreed. The last thing I want to hit with you, Venezuela. So there's been a lot of hullabaloo coming out of the United States, not on the overthrow of a sovereign country. That doesn't seem to be the issue. Not on the murder of 84, 87 people in boats. That's not really the issue. But on the double tap. Every time I say it, it blows my mind. The United States and the media in the U.S. didn't entirely take issue with the fact that Trump has just been randomly murdering people, a habitual liar, claiming that they're drugs, but everybody knows he's lying. They don't really take issue with that part. Nor do they take issue with him trying to get rid of Maduro and steal the oil and the resources in Venezuela. They don't really take issue with that part. What they've seemingly have focused on is, hey man, you double tap the boat. The people are hanging off the side of the boat, and you hit them with another missile system. In which case, that is poor sportsmanship. That seems bad. That seems impolite to do. And so we don't like that you did that. And so we're going to create a huge media storm, not about the fact that you murdered or blew up the boat in the first place, but the fact that the people were hanging off the boat and you attacked the boat again when they were hanging off the boat 41 minutes later. And it's like, so if they would have killed everybody on the boat with the first strike, that would have been okay. And the media's like, yes, that's fair game. That is so bizarre to me. This seems like an alternate reality that these people are existing in. Give me your take on this. I mean, I had a guest on the show, and they made the point of saying, or I've seen people do articles or videos saying Trump is in a trap, that Trump is effectively put all his hardware in Venezuela, His base is not for it. The American public is not for it. He's in the middle of a media firestorm right now because of the quote double tap, and that there's no way to go with this. The country doesn't really support you going into Venezuela, even though they may shrug. They don't really back you for it, so you're not getting any points. And hell, you may even lose points for it, and you're already like what 23, 30 points less than you were when you first got in office. So this is not a win. There is no win in this. Either you back away, which makes you look like an asshole for putting this much hardware in the first place, or you go forward in what can be an utter and entire quagmire and a catastrophe. Do you consider this to be a trap? How do you view this?
Well, let me say about the media. I think my guess about what has happened here is that the media, as usual, were full-throated supporters of the regime change operation that Trump has been attempting to carry out in the Caribbean and in Venezuela. And despite their best efforts to brainwash the American population, most people weren't buying it. So what the media does is it tries to push these things, but if it sees that propaganda is not working, then to retain what shred of credibility it might have, they'll criticize some aspect of the operation. And I think that's what's happened here. They saw that they were simply not winning the hearts and minds of Americans, and so they kind of turned on a little bit. But like you said, they haven't gone after the core principle, which is that this is straight up extrajudicial assassination. It's murder. And so just imagine that instead of it happening in the Caribbean, it was happening in Washington, D.C. They went into the cops, had like an RPG, and they walked up to some house, some civilian in some residential part of some poor rundown part of Washington, D.C., and they leveled the house using, a bunch of RPGs. And then afterwards, like the people in the neighborhood, like, what the hell did you do? Said, oh, there were drug traffickers in there. Well, why didn't you arrest them? Where's the evidence? What happened to due process? What happened to, the rule of law? Of course, this would be outrageous. People would be, but they did it in the Caribbean, so it's okay. This is ridiculous. Okay, they're just mass murder of civilians based upon unsubstantiated claims of narcotics trafficking, for which there is no death penalty in the United States. You don't get, even if you get convicted, even if you're convicted in the United States under U.S. law, they don't apply the death penalty to you because you were selling drugs.
Right.
So,
right.
Media should have been against this from the beginning if they actually were true to the values they claim to espouse. So that the whole thing's gone awry. I think that Trump is really, I agree with you, Jamal. I think he's stuck now between a rock and a hard place. Maduro hasn't stepped down. There's no indication he's going to step down. It is now come to Jesus time. Is he going to send in the troops or ain't he? Ain't he? And American people don't want him to. And he's already got a real credibility problem because of the genocide in Gaza, because he hasn't brought the Ukraine war to an end. I don't know what he's going to do, man. But he's in a tough spot right now.
I think it's even worse than the picture that you gave, to be honest. It would be like them taking an RPG, blowing up a house. 3 people are left laying on the ground. They wait 41 minutes and then fire another RPG to kill the other 3 people. And the press is like, whoa, whoa, whoa. That's a foul. You can't fire an RPG at the people laying on the ground. Ignoring the fact that they blew up a house with an RPG. Like, it's that bizarre. It's such a weird, it is so weird. I just, when the story first came out, I was like, how is everybody okay with him doing this? You've murdered 80 people. This is mass murder. And he is bragging about the mass murder. Hegseth is bragging about the fact that they're doing mass murder. And then it's like when the double tap came up, everybody cried foul. And the media zeroed in on the double tap. And they're like, well, these people were hanging off the boat. And of course, the military, or the very least Hegseth and his people came out and said, well, yeah, they were a threat. You mean you've blown a boat in half. You have 2 people hanging off the side of the boat. And your argument is, well, they were still a threat to the U.S. military. That's like 20 or 30% of all of the military hardware from the Navy in the Caribbean. And they say, yes, they were still a threat. They could have phoned in other narco terrorists, and they could have gotten the drugs, and they could have transported the drugs. Meaning, under their assessment, they are trying to make the argument that the people who were probably injured, hanging off the side of a boat that has just been blown up, could have somehow radioed to call other narco terrorists to drive their boats out to get the drugs and to continue the trip to the United States. And the military would have just stood there with their thumb in their ass as all of this has taken place. And so they had to murder the people because they were still a threat. And the threat being cocaine, no less, being transported to the US. It's not even fentanyl in the way that they were calling it now. They call it cocaine. It's outrageous. It's just outrageous. It's just...
Yeah. And as you probably talked about in your program, Trump just released from prison. He pardoned Juan Orlando Hernandez, the former president of Honduras, who was he actually is a drug trafficker. He was convicted last year of importing into the United States huge amounts of coke. And the guy is a free man after spending almost no time in jail. We're into like la la land here, Jamal. Like, this is so obviously a farce and a lie, and they're taking us for fools. And the good news is, I think most Americans understand this.
Do you think Maduro stays? I find like these are complicated questions, and the reason I ask this: Evo Morales, when Bolivia was under the gun after the election that Western media screamed was a fake election, despite the fact the man won by like 10 points. And they're like, oh, this election was fake, in which case you got fascists that went rummaging through the country. Evo, as opposed to having a civil war, or at the very least, using the military against the fascists, decided to leave. He didn't necessarily want to put his country through a war. That is a complicated question to me. And everything in me says, you stand and fight because you're defending the integrity of the country. And if everybody leaves the moment that they're under pressure in this way, then it's easy to knock over governments under that case, meaning governments aren't governments at the point where you don't stand and defend the fact of the integrity of the government and sovereignty of the government. That's easy for me to say, drinking a cappuccino somewhere. It's another thing for a world leader to effectively say, no, we're going to defend the integrity of the country because that's my job. That is, commander in chief, right? That's job number one. By the same token, that also means that you're putting your country through a war. Where do you think Maduro is going to fall on this? Up to this point, he has not left. And there's all sorts of media reports saying, which I don't really buy, but there are all sorts of media reports saying Maduro wants an exit, Maduro wants this, Maduro wants that. I'm very skeptical of those because I think those things are trying to create a context, not necessarily a reality, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Where do you fall on this? Because, as I said, I think this is somewhat complicated. Well, give me your take on this. Try to piecemeal this for me.
Well, if I were in his position, and there have been others, as you mentioned, who have taken this approach, I would think seriously about transitioning to a new leadership of Venezuela that is consistent with the platform and the program on which he ran. Because by all indications, that carried the day in the last election. I can't guarantee that. I was there as an election observer at the invitation of the Socialist Party, the governing party, Nicolas Maduro's party, and along with, I was there last year, and with something like, I think it was 150 or so international election observers, and I don't think any of us can guarantee that the result was legitimate because we don't have access to the all of the data, voting data. But we went to polls, various different polls, and none of us, certainly nobody I spoke to, observed anything which suggested anything other than a fair and free election. It looked like a legitimate election to us. And, in the past, Venezuela's electoral system has received high praise from experts in the field, including from the West. So I believe that probably the result is legitimate. And as long as what remains at the head of the Venezuelan state is consistent with what the Venezuelan people voted for, I think that Nicolas Maduro, if he could secure the détente with the United States by leaving and having somebody else carry that platform forward, that he should think about it seriously, just because that's going to save Venezuelan lives. But the thing is, Jamal, that this isn't about Nicolas Maduro.
Right.
This is about the program that he represents. This is about Chavismo. This is about socialism, or their version of socialism in Venezuela. They don't want that. They want a lackey like Machado to take over and allow the corporatocracy in the United States to rape and pillage the Venezuelan economy and turn it into an abject vassal. So Maduro, unfortunately, leaving would not, I think, solve the problem. There would still be concerted efforts to overthrow the movement he represents. And so if I'm him, I'd say, if that's the reality you're confronting, and leaving is not going to change, is not going to avoid massive suffering for the Venezuelan people, then I would stay.
Yeah. Yeah. The job of the president is to defend the integrity of the state. And what the United States is trying to do is destroy the integrity of the state for all intents and purposes. No, you have my agreement. Dimitri, man, I've enjoyed this conversation. I swear to God, I have. Thank you for this. Dimitri Lascaris, he is lawyer, journalist, activist from Montreal, Quebec. He runs the show Reason to Resist. It is a fantastic show. When is your next program, by the way?
We're about to do a live stream in an hour about primarily about the killing of this gangster collaborator in Gaza.
Yes. Oh God, what is his name? It was one that was effectively
Al-Shabaab.
Al-Shabaab, right? He was the one that was leading the fight against Hamas, backed by the Israelis, stealing food, and then Israel will say, "Hey, Hamas is stealing food," whereas they had their own gangs in Gaza. Yeah, that trash is no longer existing. He is rotting in hell. Yeah. Dimitri, shout out to you, man. Thank you for this. You be safe, okay?
Thank you. Peace out.
Bye-bye. All right. Shout out to Dimitri. We have reached the end. If you guys dig what the show is putting down, definitely like this video, share this content. You can support this content, PayPal, Patreon, Super Chat, Super Sticker, buy me a coffee. I think that's everything. I don't know why they have so many of these things, but it is what it is. What do you call it? 28-point prank plan. 28-point prank plan. Yeah. And he named names. That's the funniest thing in the world to me. He say I name names. Look, I would say Macaris is one of the best. Macaris is fantastic. So no shade on Macaris at all. What is the guy that works with for the Duran? I can't think of his name. Alex Cristofaro. Both of them work very well together. Macaris is probably the show I listen to probably more. I don't begrudge anybody in the very beginning of giving the benefit of the doubt. I think that's just being a person. And I don't want to be so cynical as for the cynicism to ignore something real taking place, if that makes sense. And so it's one of those things where it's like, okay, skeptical, but I'm open. Like, meaning I could be wrong, right? So my skepticism could be proven wrong, but I need that skepticism to be proven wrong. That's the difference. Trump is a flagrant liar. Let's just be honest, right? They're not bringing cocaine or drugs into the United States in speedboats. That's not happening. Trump did not end 30 wars, or how many of the wars he claimed that he ended. There was no ceasefire in Gaza. Let's just be straight with it. And so the same person who claims all of this is now come to the table claiming that he wants a deal in Ukraine. Now, again, I don't doubt that he wants a deal. He wants a deal on the U.S. terms. There's a difference in those things. If rando thug comes to my car and say, "Hey, that's a pretty sexy car you got there, and I'm going to take that car, and I'm going to take your wife, who's also in that car, because I think she's hot." And I'm saying, "You're out of your goddamn mind." He's okay, well, let's negotiate. Well, obviously, I'm not going to negotiate on these terms, right? And in the terms that he's given is effectively like, well, hey, you can keep your life, but I get both of those things. These are not terms that are acceptable. I hope you get my point. If you're negotiating and the terms that you're putting out are completely and radically unacceptable to the other side, especially the other side that is winning the conflict, then you are not being sincere. I don't doubt that he wants a deal. He wants a deal on U.S. terms. As I keep pointing out, the loser does not get to dictate terms. It doesn't work that way. It just doesn't work that way. If you and I are playing chess and we have a wager, if you lose your wager. And I'm saying that I understand. Look, I think a lot of people just want the war to end. And after all of these years with Joe Biden being in office and being so adamant about the war continuing, somebody who's singing a tune, they're open to the fact that the person is singing a tune. I think they're being, all of those people that he mentioned, I think Glenn Greenwald, he could be a little bit irascible. He is more, what's the word I'm looking for? There's a very specific word. He can be, what is the word I'm looking for? What is the word I'm looking for? It dropped out of my mind. Contrarian. He can be very contrarian, sometimes to his own detriment. Contrarian is not a position per se, right? Analysis brings you to a position, not just being a contrarian. Contrarian can be right or it can be wrong. It's kind of like cynicism. So he could just be a contrarian in the case of him taking a particular position. I don't think it's that they enjoy Trump's policies because many of these people don't even live here. Daniel Davis does, but the other ones don't even live here. McCarthy is in Britain. Christopher, I think he's in like Greece or somewhere. So I don't think it's that. I think they're true believers. I think from their point of view, they think that because a deal is on the table, that Trump is open for a deal. Now, I would say between Ukraine collapsing on Trump's watch versus Ukraine trying to get some kind of deal, whatever that deal is, he would obviously prefer a deal as opposed to the Ukrainian military collapsing in a year and a half. The catch is, what kind of deal can you accept? And I hope you get my point with that. The Russians have core demands. Can the United States, under any president, accept a surrender document from the Russians, basically saying, we need your surrender, and we will dress it up in a peace deal, but it will be your surrender, and it will be an unmistakable surrender. It will be clear as the brimming sun in the midday. That's what we require from you. Can the U.S. president accept that? And if the answer is no, then the war continues, which is why I believe the war continues. This nonsense that Donald Trump is putting out was a dead letter. And some of the things in it were so laughable that it obviously was never going to be accepted. If the Russians are going to say, hey, we'll talk about it, we're open to discussing. And from my point of view, the Russians are chasing safety. So they probably are open to discussing it as opposed to going to the Polish border. But they may not get what they want in the context of a deal. What they may get is through military force. Now, if it looks as if the Ukrainian military is collapsing, well, factors may change, right? But we'll see. Right now, I'm skeptical. Right now, I am skeptical. We have a chat. Oh, this name is going to kill me. I think this is Zoila Rosa. My question is, where is the Epstein files? Oh, Zoila Rosa. That is a hell of a question. That is a hell of a question. All right. So you remember that they forced, Thomas Massie was able to get a discharge position to force this to go through Congress. And the humiliation alone at having to throw your body to defend a pedophile is so over the top and so humiliating that they effectively forced Trump to sign it. Trump was losing points. That 30-point drop that Trump experienced in regards to his approval rating, that's from Republicans and Democrats, meaning the Democrats were already baked in, right? So Trump was as popular as headlights with Democrats. So you either get independents and Republicans that are the ones that are effectively going to damage your approval rating going forward, because those are the ones that you're going to get independents in a certain measure, and you're going to get Republicans in, let's say, like 80%. But if you get independents saying, well, this sucks, why is he throwing his body to protect a pedophile? Why is he throwing his body out there in order to defend pedophiles? Okay, well, that looks bad, right? And any defense that you come up with to try to justify that is going to fall on flat ears. Unless you're a former weapons inspector, in which case you're given a pass. But I hope you get my point. In that very specific case, for all intents and purposes, what you ended up with was Trump being a horse being brought to water to drink. Just because a horse was brought to water to drink doesn't necessarily mean the horse is going to allow those files to go through, especially considering his name is in those files. People who are effectively giving the money is probably in those files. And Israel, maybe all throughout those files. So what Pam Bondi did, after Pam Bondi saying, there's nothing to see here, folks. There is no Epstein list. It doesn't exist. Came back and said, well, we found the lists, and we now need to do further investigations. With the idea that the further investigations effectively try to put the kibosh on the lists coming out. So effectively saying, well, look, your congressional investigation can't get in the way of us doing our investigation in a legal sense. It's a dog and pony show. It's their bait and switch. It's the way of them trying to prevent the lists from effectively coming out. Where's the Epstein list? It's a damn good question. It's a damn good question. All right. All right. I'm sorry. I'm being a bit of a dick. No shade. Well, I guess it is shade, but it's not intentional. It's just nobody asked that question. All right. I am going to say like. I'm going to say share. I am going to say subscribe. Kash Patel. Yeah, Kash Patel is problematic too. All of those are problematic, right? I mean, none of these people are qualified for the job. Here's the thing. If you're running a company, if you are doing a show, if you are doing something that matters, it is not a bad thing to have people who are just as smart, if not smarter than you around you, or who are competent in the areas to which they work. Meaning you may be good at a very specific thing, right? So you may do fine during the show. You may suck at everything else associated with it. You may suck at bringing on guests. You may suck at publications. You may suck at all of that stuff. It does not behoove you to bring on sycophants. It just doesn't. If you're trying to do something and do something well, it behooves you to bring people on who are just as good, if not better, than you at whatever you're doing. The reason I say that is somebody who's thin-skinned and is petty as Donald Trump brings on sycophants. They're incompetent. Hegseth being a good example. Kash Patel being a good example. Most press secretaries are incompetent, but that's kind of their job. It's like, imagine for the moment, you're the press secretary, and the president brings you into the room and says, hey, I need you to go out and defend the administration for not releasing a list of pedophiles that may or may not have influence in the U.S. government and may be connected with foreign governments that we're associated with. What do you say? What do you say? How do you, and knowing your job is to go out and defend an apex predator. That is now your job. That is now the thing that has been put into your lap. You, Caroline Levitt, or Levitt, whatever her name is, need to now go out and defend this administration for protecting pedophiles. There's no good look for that. It's like, what is the best way to deal with pain, if that makes sense? And I know that sounds weird. I used to have this belief that the absorption of pain needs to be done in a particular way. And at some point I realized, actually it doesn't. It's just absorption of pain. There is no good way to get out of that. There is no elegant way of dealing with pain and trauma, et cetera, et cetera. I'm saying it's the same thing. There is no good way to look good defending pedophilia. It's just not. If your job as a press secretary is to do that, you're always going to look bad. Whether you're Jen Psaki, whether you are, what is the LGBTQ one that Joe Biden brought in? I can't think of her name. Haitian. It'll come to me in a moment. Whether you're her, whether you're Psaki, add in any random press secretary. When they are asking you to defend ridiculous things and things that make you look bad, there is no good way to get out of that, which is why most press secretaries are just propagandists and they look like fucking idiots. That is a job that there is no elegance. There is nothing to do. Meaning, unless your government is just legit, unless you have a government that is just basically honest, somewhat transparent, that every random blue moon you have to deal with something where you have to go out and defend something insane, then yes, the press secretary is going to look like a maniac. So, yeah, there's that. There is that. M Sparks, super sticker. Thank you, M Sparks. Thank you, M Sparks. You have my appreciation. When I tell you guys that you guys help pay for this show, I mean it and I appreciate it. Embrace the pain and realize that pain is the body working to heal energy, whatever. 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 Send healing energies to your owie. Okay, whatever. I hear you. 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 Yes, your body is trying to heal whatever it's trying to heal. That shit hurts. This is not a Tom Cruise moment, right? Where Tom Cruise is in Mission Impossible is like, it's only pain. It's only pain. God, I love him as an actor. I honestly, I can watch Tom Cruise run for like 2 hours. He could just have the entire Mission Impossible, him just running from point A to point B. But he has a way of emoting that is just fantastic to me. But when he's like in the chair and he's like his arms behind his back and he's about to be tortured and he's looking the woman in the eye, he's like, look at me, look at me. That scene is so badass. Tom Cruise is literally about to be broken and he is still trying to control the situation by dealing with the other woman saying, look at me, look at me. Remember, it's only pain. It's only pain. It's only pain. It's only in the body. Whatever, man. Whatever. Whatever. That shit hurts. That shit hurts. Pain sucks. No, it's not Eyes Wide Shut. It's Mission Impossible. I think it was the last one, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, I think it was the last one. Yeah, it's only pain. It's like, look at me, look at me. It's only pain. It's only pain. It's like, okay, dude, you telling me that doesn't change the fact that you just broke my femur. It's like, yeah, whatever, man. It's like, whatever. In the movies. Yeah, it's in the movies. Exactly. It's in the movies. It's in the movies. It's like, remember, it's only pain. It's such a good scene though, right? Like shit like that. Like, when you're watching it, it's so good. It's so good. Because super spy, in this moment, like he's so good at his job that he's been able to even just look at pain in this kind of third person point of view. Like he's like above it. The body is there and he's just watching the body as it absorbs pain. It's like, get out of here, man. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. Unless you're some kind of monk or whatever else. It's like, get out of here. And morphine is only morphine. I prefer Dilaudid. Dilaudid. Give me Dilaudid. Give me not that only pain shit. Give me Dilaudid. I prefer Dilaudid. Tom Cruise was in the closet. Tom Cruise is not gay. Why do you think Tom Cruise is gay? Sean Connery for me. Sean Connery is badass. James Bond. Yeah. James Bond. Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. I am going to end this. I'm going to end this. We've come to the end. I'm going to say like. I'm going to say share. I'm going to say subscribe. Roger Moore. Roger Moore wasn't bad. Roger Moore wasn't bad. But Sean Connery, for some reason, that's my generation of James Bond. It's just my memory of it. Lidocaine is what you want for nerve pain. Actually, I prefer Tramadol for nerve pain. Tramadol or gabapentin. Gabapentin helps, but Tramadol for breakthrough. You should have Gerald Horne. I have had Gerald Horne on the show. Gerald Horne is a fantastic guest. He is an awesome guest. He really is. Dr. Horne is a movie guru. Is he? I didn't know that. I didn't know that. Yeah, the James Bond. It's funny. I don't think I've sat through an entire James Bond film, even though I probably can pick out every scene in those films. It's very well. But yeah, Sean Connery was my favorite for James Bond. He was like, he is the quintessential Bond. Roger Moore is probably number 2 in regards to quintessential Bond. I think, did Pierce Brosnan play Bond or something like that? I don't remember. Yeah, Dr. No or Octopussy. Octopussy. Or Mrs. Moneypenny. No, I can't believe you're saying Pierce Brosnan was the best James Bond. And that is heretical. That is heretical. Yeah, Octopussy. I can't believe you could never put some shit out there like that today. Octopussy. Or she's my Mrs. Moneypenny. Everybody needs Mrs. Moneypenny. 100 miles per hour libido. And that's the other, again, right? That's the other thing, right? He is a man's man in the way that men's men used to be. Let's see, back then you can get away with that shit. Frank Sinatra. I remember I got into a fight with my ex-girlfriend, my ex-girlfriend. Sinatra has this line, and wives should always be lovers too. Fantastic song. He has, I think it was with Count Basie Orchestra, but effectively, wives should always be lovers too. Run to his arms when he comes home to you. Effectively, he says, day after day, there are girls at the what is it? There day after day, there's girls at the office, and there's a line where he says, "And men will always be men." That line is, God, I love that line, and I love the song in general. And my ex was like, "What kind of shit is that?" Like, she took serious issue with that. I was like, "What are you talking about?" It's like, for one, the girls at the office, I think he said girls, but her issue with it was, you're giving the guy a pass. You're effectively saying, look, there are very attractive women at the office that he works with, and men will always be men. Effectively, it's like they don't have a choice. It's like he can't help it. He can't help himself. And I love the fact that Sinatra, as he's making this point, is kind of like, shit, man, what do you expect us to do? Like, what do you want me to do? There's a scene in Three Body. I think it's Dark Force. No, not Dark Force. Death Sin. It's Earth Remembered trilogy. Shish and Lu, but Three Body series. And she's the sword holder. The woman becomes a sword holder. And you are given somebody who is supposed to be maternal, especially in this particular generation, control to potentially end 2 worlds. It's supposed to end 2 worlds. Because if you're attacked, you're supposed to hit the button and destroy both planets. There's more to it than that, but basically that's what it is. It's sword holder. The sword holder. And there's a scene in it where the Tresselorns attack, and she's standing there, and she's like, "What do you expect me to do?" And she's like, it comes to this recognition of, I fucked up. I got this wrong. I am not the person who's supposed to be holding this job. Okay, well, that's a little too late for that, right? But it's, what do you expect me to do? It's that line in the book. And Sinatra kind of makes that case of like, hey, day after day, there are women at the office or girls at the office, and men will always be men. And his point is, ladies, you are supposed to be lovers too. It is not entirely your man's responsibility. When he comes home, you're supposed to run into his arms. Like, it's all of this 50s stuff. And my ex was like, dude, what kind of shit is that? Like, how are you giving that guy a pass? Regardless of there being women at the office, regardless of those women being attractive. How is Sinatra just entirely giving the man a pass in this particular case. And as I pointed out to her, Sinatra is a man. He is unapologetically a man. And the argument that he's making, if indeed there's an argument that's built into that, is unapologetically a man. It's like Jill Scott, right? Jill Scott is unapologetically a woman when she's singing a song. These songs are, these albums are worlds of these particular artists. It's their mind space. Yeah, we kind of ended up in an argument. It's just fucking outrageous. International Man in Mystery, and it's the CIA, right? International Man. That is. Oh, what is the name of that? That's the British thing. What is it? Michael Myers? Oh, I can't think of the name of it. I can see it. That shit was funny. I think that introduced me to Burt Bacharach. Burt Bacharach, Elvis Costello. The Spy Who Shagged Me. The Spy Who Shagged Me. That was a woman bond as well. There is not a woman's bond. Nor should there be. Nor should there be. There shouldn't be a woman's bond. James Bond is... It would be weird to have a woman's bond. I mean, like, I hate when they do that shit. Like, you have a character, it's like, we need to make Batman black. Why? Why? Why do you need to make Batman black? Why? Why? It's like, it's hate when they do that shit. On Star Trek, I got it, right? Where it's like, we're having a woman captain and a black captain and an Asian captain and a, we're going back to a white captain and a black woman captain and blah, blah, blah. I kind of got it because it didn't necessarily adversely affect the show. And you will have these different captains because each one of these different captains is running their own shit. Personally, I love Janeway as a captain. Loved it. A powerful woman is an attractive thing. Even though some people hated Voyager, I didn't like the characters in Voyager, even though I like Janeway. What they did to Q is a travesty, with the exception of one episode. Picard, probably one of my favorites, even though in person you may think he's an asshole. Even though Patrick Stewart is awesome as a person. Cisco, probably Picard and Cisco. Oh God, that's a hard one, man. Because I like all of the captains, to be honest. It's hard for me to pick a favorite. I think my issue is Deep Space Nine is the better show. Yeah, Deep Space Nine is probably the best Star Trek that's out there. But I think when people think of Star Trek, they think of Next Generation. I don't know. Totally agree with you, Jamal. It's stupid when they make all these superheroes black when they already have black super. Yes, thank you, thank you. Look, it's one thing. I give you an example. Atomic Blonde. Atomic Blonde. It's a movie. What is Charlize Theron? Fantastic show. Fantastic film. Meaning you made a character. It was a female character. And the shit works. You've made a good movie. And you were able to create a new character to embody the image that you wanted to fulfill. As opposed to saying, we need a woman Batman. Okay, why do you need a woman Batman? Right? Like, the entire iconography of James Bond is spy, ladies' man. He can have sex with pretty much any woman that he wants. You know, if your mom is fair game, James Bond would knock over your mom. That's who James Bond is. His libido is running, as you point out, 100 miles per hour, constantly. Was it like Mars conjunct Venus conjunct Pluto or some shit like that in Aries? Like it is just coming off of him. His pheromones are so over the top. They're like superhuman. That is his character. That would be very weird for that to be a woman character. And I don't even think it would be interpreted in the same way. Like, look, let's be honest. And some may disagree with me on this. It is typically more acceptable, for better or for worse. I'm not taking a side on it. I'm just pointing it out. And the Sinatra song makes the point very clear. For men to behave in a certain way that is not seen as acceptable for women. I'm just pointing it out. And you can see that in the way that men raise their kids, where it's like, oh, that a boy. That's my boy. A man would never say that about his girl or his daughter if his daughter was out there just banging random guys. It was like, oh, this daughter's a whore. What's wrong with my daughter? Now, whether that's fair, whether that's good or bad or not, is kind of besides the point. I'm just saying how that will be interpreted in a movie would be very different. If James Bond hooks up with 5 different women in a film, it's like, whoa, James Bond libido is on target. That a boy. If you have a female character that has sex with 5 different men, they could be like, the woman's a whore. Whether it's fair or not is besides the point. I'm just kind of pointing out that the experience will be very different in the way that these things are seen. It's just strange. You don't need a female James Bond. That's my point. Don't need a female James Bond. Make another character. And you can do her just as well. She could be a spy. She could be all that stuff. You don't need to be a female James Bond. They have black characters of Robin Hood. See, I've never read the book in Robin Hood, so I don't know. Honestly, I think of Batman as an actual... Oh, wait a minute. Honestly, I think of Batman as an actual bad guy. He's a rich person who beats up on the mentally ill. Well, he beats up on the poor. He beats up on the poor. Batman has all of this money, billions of dollars. He has so much money that he built a bat cave with all of these highly scientific devices in order to go out and beat the shit out of people on the street for street crime. And it's like, you can't find anything else to do with your money that would put a dent in street crime, as opposed to you going out and beating the shit out the poor. Okay. Okay. That's where we're at. Not to mention the whole hanging out with children thing. I mean, Batman's a pedophile. Let's be very clear. Robin is a child. And Batman keeps bringing in these children to live with him and train them to go out and beat the shit out of other people. So right off the bat, Batman has a psychological issue. He's mentally ill. On top of being mentally ill, he continues to bring in kids. A grown man is living with children that he is training to go out with him in his mentally ill condition on this stuff. And nobody looks at this and says, he is dressing Robin in booty shorts, in flamingo colors. Why is everybody okay with this? Why is everybody okay with this? Let's just be honest. I mean, I'm just pointing out. If you're a grown man living with a child and you're forcing that child to dress in red booty shorts, I'm going to think some kind of way about that relationship. I'm going to think some kind of way about that relationship. Somebody needs to intervene. And the fact that Alfred is there and it's not saying anything is bad on Alfred. It's like, fuck Alfred. Yes, the original Adam West. You know, it's funny, though. The reason why they put the butler in the Adam West thing is because effectively they thought the people would think Batman was a pedophile. If you listen to the people when they're talking about like the way they set up the show, and they were like, hey, man, it looks bad when you have Boy Wonder living with this grown man. Okay, we need to do something about this. Otherwise, people are going to get ideas. Yeah. What's the old Batman? Adam West. Yeah, Adam West was funny. Adam West was funny. Everyone was in spandex. Yeah, I call them booty shorts with spandex. Yeah. Yeah, fair enough. Dressing a child in spandex. Frank Miller's Batman was dark. But the idea that he'd be Superman is nonsense. I mean, you are effectively living off of Superman's morality, which, fair enough. But all superheroes, spandex guys, stop. Well, if you notice, they don't do that anymore. Like these days, they have them in like more like body armor type stuff. Yeah, they have more like body armor type stuff. He lived at his home, not in the Batcave. No, I say he built a Batcave. I say built a Batcave. At least that's what I thought I said. Like you have so much money that you build a high-tech cave to host gadgets, tools, electronics, all of this stuff. Like that's just an outrageous amount of money in order to be able to pull shit off like that. Blood Meridian was his favorite book. Harold Bloomberg from Yale English Department. Blood Meridian. I haven't read that book, Cherie. Spandex with Kevlar, yeah. All right, we've gone off the rails because now we're talking about films and books and movies and stuff like that, which I enjoy talking about. In fact, I would love to do a book review channel or show. But I'm going to call this a day. I am going to say, like Clark Kent was a reporter. Yes, Clark Kent was. Yeah, he was a reporter. Clark Kent was interesting because Superman was a real person. Clark Kent was his image of humanity, which is just wow. Frank Miller's Superman was already defeated before meeting the retired Bruce Wayne in battle. He was under the control of Ronald Reagan and Lex Luthor. I thought it was Poison Ivy. If I remember correctly, he was under the control of Poison Ivy, and Batman had like a kryptonite ring or something. I don't remember it in its entirety. All right, I'm going to say like. I'm going to say share. I'm going to say subscribe. I'm going to say you can support this content. PayPal, Patreon, Super Chat, Buy Me a Coffee, Super Sticker. I think that's everything. I'm going to say be kind to the degree that you can be kind. And I will see you guys. I'll see you guys Monday morning. Be safe all. Have a good one.